Imagine being able to see the success rate of everything you do. That's precisely what happens to a man who's weary of his mundane existence, until one day, unexpectedly, he acquires an incredible ability. He can recognize the likelihood of success in any decision. Investing money can be a great way to grow your wealth over time. He already knows whether it will work. With that, he begins to transform his life entirely, rising from obscurity to someone with immense power, consistently selecting the best path while steering clear of any mistakes. So without further ado, let's dive into the video. A young man walked sadly through the streets after his landlord had kicked him out and changed all the locks. If he couldn't pay the rent, he might have to sleep on the street. To make matters worse, his new book had failed once more, leaving him unable to rely on manuscript fees. His name was Bai Wu, an 18th-tier writer and a complete failure. His representative work was titled, "Starting Today, I Raise Slimes." He rummaged through his pockets, calculating how many meals he could still afford with the little money he had left. But when he saw how much he still had, he thought that perhaps he would need to wash dishes to survive. As he walked, he spotted a convenience store and realized that his life had already hit rock bottom. Buying a lottery ticket to test his luck no longer seemed important. He requested a 5 yuan scratch-off ticket from the seller. The shopkeeper set a few tickets on the table and asked which one he would like. The protagonist, feeling utterly hopeless, remarked that he was simply trying his luck, so anyone would do. But suddenly, his vision began to blur slightly. Percentages began to appear in front of him. Frightened, he wondered what was happening, his vision slightly blurry. Perhaps it was due to the fact that he had stayed up all night writing the day before. The shopkeeper handed him a ticket. The rate on it was 100%. The protagonist still could not grasp what that was. He wondered if he was the only one who could see it, or if it was merely an illusion. Nevertheless, he decided he should buy a ticket to find out. The moment he scratched it, he won 10 yuan. This filled him with excitement, and he began to believe that it might truly be what he had been imagining. He asked the seller for 2 more and selected the ones with a 100% rating. Each of them earned him 50 yuan. The protagonist couldn't believe that the numbers on the scratch-offs reflected the probability of winning. Excited by this revelation, he asked the shopkeeper for 11 more scratch-offs. The shopkeeper was somewhat taken aback by that request. Bai Wu picked a total of 10 tickets with a 100% success rate and 1 ticket with a wheel percent success rate. He chose to begin with the option that had a 0% chance of winning, and in the end, he didn't win anything at all. He was impressed to discover that he could genuinely observe the success rate. The shopkeeper laughed and patted him on the shoulder, saying that playing a little was fun, but playing too much could harm both the body and mind. He advised him to learn to stop while he was ahead. Bai Wu tossed all his money onto the table, requesting 10 20-yuan lottery tickets and 1 10-yuan ticket. The shopkeeper was happy because he believed he would take all of the protagonist's money. Holding the tickets in his hand, he asked if the protagonist was really sure he wanted to buy them, suggesting he shouldn't let the last 200 yuan in prize money he had won earlier go to waste. Minutes later, the shopkeeper transferred 20,420 yuan, marveling at the absurd luck that had come his way. Bai Wu believed that the percentages on the lottery tickets indicated the probability of winning, but the prize amount remained entirely unknown. It would be helpful for him to know the prize amount before purchasing the ticket. For example, the probability of winning $100 or other amounts left the shopkeeper baffled. He couldn't understand how so much luck could exist in a single person. Suddenly, the protagonist noticed several details. He asked the shopkeeper to sell him a few more scratch-off tickets, ensuring there were no mistakes and no hits. This time, the percentages varied slightly. Some tickets had just 10%, while others ranged from 100% to 150%, and even up to 200%. The shopkeeper advised the protagonist to stop while he was ahead, reminding him that luck is unpredictable and can come and go in an instant. Bai Wu laughed and said it was fine. Feeling that his luck was very good that day, he added that if he didn't win, the shopkeeper could consider it a contribution to a worthy cause. The shopkeeper was quite irritated, believing the protagonist had just won 20,000, and he was eager to see how long this streak of luck would last. Bai Wu picked another ticket that had a 10% chance of winning, and when he scratched it, he discovered he had won. He laughed, noting that it seemed his luck was still with him. The shopkeeper grew increasingly frustrated with everything happening around him. Meanwhile, the protagonist continued to scratch and win. The shopkeeper realized that 6 tickets in a row had already won prizes. How could anyone on this planet be that lucky? The protagonist scratched off another ticket and remarked that his luck was exceptionally good that day, as he had just won once more. He glanced at the other ticket still for sale, contemplating whether he should purchase it. They could determine the success rate of winning 50 yuan. Suddenly, all the percentages that had been displayed before simply changed drastically, and the protagonist celebrated because of this. Was precisely what he had anticipated. The sudden success rate provided the answer to the question he needed at that moment. As long as he adjusted the questions and utilized the success rate correctly, he could easily deceive the store owner. With that deception, he could change his own destiny. Bai Wu glanced at the shopkeeper and laughed, remarking that, by the looks of it, his luck was indeed very good. The shopkeeper inquired whether he truly meant very good, because judging by appearances, he must have accumulated a great deal of good karma in his past life. The protagonist laughed, realizing that with that divine artifact in his hands, this was not merely about accumulating good karma from a past life. Bai Wu chuckled warmly and remarked that his luck was quite good, so he would like to have 20 more tickets. The shopkeeper grew slightly irritated, telling the protagonist that, while luck was indeed a good thing, he should be careful not to become addicted to it. Bai Wu expressed that it was fine because his luck was particularly good that day, and he believed those 20 tickets might also hold prizes. Even if he lost, he had already won over 20,000, so it wouldn't make much difference to him. He placed the ticket on the table and picked up a coin. The shopkeeper had already placed his hand over his heart, bracing himself for a heart attack. The protagonist started to scratch slowly. The shopkeeper observed every precise movement with keen attention, but as soon as the scratch appeared, it became clear that something was wrong. The off was completely scratched. The shopkeeper breathed a sigh of relief, grateful that the protagonist had not won again. He told the young man that he had already warned him, as luck was both unpredictable and unreliable. Bai Wu believed that luck was indeed unreliable, but he also recognized that something else was just as unpredictable. He quickly continued scratching off the remaining scratch-offs there, and simply did not win any of them. The shopkeeper felt relieved and remarked that he had already warned the protagonist to quit while he was ahead. However, the protagonist refused to listen, seemingly having exhausted all his luck for the year with his consecutive wins. Bai Wu examined the remaining tickets and noticed one with an exceptionally high percentage, feeling a sense of admiration. He held the ticket in his hand, realizing that he did not trust his luck, but rather the ability he had just gained. He had deliberately purchased scratch-off tickets with a 0% success rate, allowing him to scratch several without winning, and thereby avoid raising suspicion by winning too much. His losses had been intentional. The shopkeeper made an offer, stating he would return 100 and let the rest go. He reasoned that, given the protagonist's current luck, winning at least one of those 10 tickets would already be quite fortunate. The protagonist refused, stating there was no need. He thanked him for his kindness, but expressed that he could no longer believe. However, this was also part of his plan, as it was time to make a change. He couldn't simply let that opportunity slip away. The shopkeeper told the protagonist he could do whatever he wanted, as he had already tried to warn him several times. As soon as the protagonist scratched off another ticket, he shouted to the shopkeeper that his luck had returned. The shopkeeper examined the scratch-off ticket and announced it was only 10 yuan. However, from the way Bai Wu shouted, it sounded as if he had won 10,000. Bai Wu managed to win several times in a row, however. He felt a bit disappointed because the maximum prize was only 100. The shopkeeper was in disbelief, exclaiming that the boy was some sort of freak of nature. The protagonist concentrated, expressing to both the heavenly spirit and the earthly spirit his strong desire to obtain that last ticket, hoping to win a grand prize of over 10,000. The shopkeeper asked if he truly understood how rare it was for someone to win a big prize of over $10,000 on a scratch-off ticket. Bai Wu laughed. He picked up the ticket he had saved for last and told the shopkeeper that he had just won $15,000. From the looks of it, his luck was truly defying the heavens. As soon as the shopkeeper handed him the 15,000 prize, Bai Wu inquired about what he had mentioned earlier regarding a lucky streak. The shopkeeper dismissed it as nothing, even though he sensed that something was amiss. Suddenly, he had a brilliant idea. He looked at the tickets, considering that the winning rate for scratch-off lottery tickets was determined when they were printed. Since the protagonist had already won so much, the remaining tickets were likely nothing but worthless scraps. In an effort to recover some of the money he had lost, the shopkeeper approached the protagonist, remarking on his incredible luck and asking if he was interested in taking another small risk. He considered that if other customers came in later to buy more tickets and only won 1 or 2 out of every 10, it would be detrimental to his own business. Bai Wu inquired about the winning rates of the remaining scratch-off tickets in the cabinet. Suddenly, a new ability revealed the percentage of each ticket, and to his surprise, most of them were at 0%. Only one came close to 5%, and that was still not enough. Bai Wu advised the shopkeeper to stop, believing that he had reached the peak of his luck and that things were likely to decline from that point onward. Bai Wu recalled that the welfare lottery regulations set a 30% winning rate for scratch-off tickets, but he felt certain that his chances would be only 5%. The shopkeeper continued to encourage the protagonist, reminding him that he had already won more than 35,000. He questioned why the protagonist couldn't keep taking advantage of this opportunity. Bai Wu explained that even a small loss, between 200 or 300, still mattered. He emphasized the importance of being frugal to ensure a good life in the future. The shopkeeper grew a bit irritated, as the protagonist had only recently begun to express these thoughts. Bai Wu told the shopkeeper that he understood his good intentions. However, he believed that true happiness came from contentment. The protagonist believed he had made an enormous profit this time. However, he began to wonder if his superpower could be applied in areas beyond just lottery tickets. As he approached the door, he asked about the system's success rate for opening it. Once again, a system screen appeared displaying a 100% success rate, confirming that it truly worked. But suddenly, the rate that had been at 100% began to drop sharply until it reached 0%. The protagonist felt a surge of fear and stepped back from the door. Suddenly, a husky came running over and crashed through the glass door. Bai Wu recognized that luck had saved him from disaster, as the dog was incredibly reckless and had nearly run him over. The shopkeeper, who had been observing everything, was surprised, and he began to wonder how the protagonist knew he had to dodge in advance. Before he could leave the store, the shopkeeper grabbed his arm and warned him not to dare to go. Bai Wu was startled, believing it was all over and that he had been caught. The shopkeeper inquired how he was aware. The protagonist believed this was to be expected, given that his previous actions had been somewhat unusual. He inquired about his ability to deceive the shopkeeper and pose as a mere fortune teller, asking what the success rate would be. The system indicated that he had approximately a 50% probability. He decided to change the question, asking whether bragging that his family had passed down the art of fortune-telling for generations would increase his chances. The system has been updated to 64%. He decided to test it and told the shopkeeper that he was, in fact, a fortune-teller. He emphasized that he should not be confused with street corner scammers, as his family's lineage traces back to the Zhou dynasty, boasting a history of 2,000 to 3,000 years. The shopkeeper suspected he was likely lying and questioned whether it had truly been 2,000 to 3,000 years. He emphasized his strong belief in science and his skepticism toward ghosts and spirits. He also mentioned that if the protagonist's family had existed for 2,000 or 3,000 years, they should be famous, assuming that were truly the case. The percentage, which had previously been at 64%, began to decline to 60%. The shopkeeper wondered why he had never heard of the protagonist before. Bai Wu believed that the box above the shopkeeper's head was a sign of divine intervention, making it difficult for him to trust solely in science. He continued with the same story, took a deep breath, and explained that his family had been passing down this lineage for generations. Revealing heavenly secrets incurred divine retribution, so they never interfered in drastic changes, which is why they remained relatively unknown. The percentage began to rise again, filling the protagonist with hope. He placed the winning tickets on the counter and told the shopkeeper that he had already witnessed his divination abilities. The success rate increased to 80%. The shopkeeper acknowledged that this was difficult, but questioned whether that could truly be the reason for it. Bai Wu confirmed that was exactly it. He emphasized that he had just divined his fortune and wealth. Although he had calculated all his winnings, he chose to stop due to the reaction from the heavens. The 10 tickets he had not won were a clear omen. The percentage increased to 90%. The shopkeeper asked if that was truly what had happened, as he had been wondering how Bai Wu could have been fortunate enough to win 2 big prizes in a row on scratch-off tickets. The protagonist continued, stating that as soon as he left, he suddenly sensed that something was wrong and foresaw a bloody disaster, which prompted him to step back. The shopkeeper was finally convinced and addressed the protagonist as Master, inquiring about the price of a divination. As he wished to have his luck read, Bai Wu saw this as a great opportunity to assess the success rate. He chose to refuse, stating that it was better to forget the matter, as his lineage emphasized karma and retribution. He had just divined his own financial fortune, which would impact his business in the future. Every cause had an effect, so he asked the shopkeeper what exactly he wanted the protagonist to divine. The shopkeeper stressed his desire for his new master to help him divine his luck and wealth, as his old hometown was facing demolition and compensation had yet to be negotiated. Consequently, he wanted to ask the protagonist to predict how much the other party would accept if he made an offer. Baiwu asked the shopkeeper what he considered a reasonable price. The shopkeeper stated that the house measured between 200 to 300 square meters, and with a rate of 10,000 per square meter, that should be accurate. Baiwu nodded in understanding and closed his eyes to focus. Inquiring about his new ability, he wanted to know the success rate of the other party accepting his offer of 2 million yuan as compensation. The ability confirmed it was 100%. Curious, he then asked about the success rate if he increased the offer to 3 million. That was also completely accurate. He increased it to 4 million. It was also 100%. He decided to increase it to 5 million. However, the rate plummeted to 10%. Regarding 4.5 million, after a brief moment, he opened his eyes. The shopkeeper became excited and asked if he had managed to divine it. The protagonist stated he could offer 4,300,000, confident they would agree without hesitation. If he chose to offer 4.5 million, there was an 80% chance of acceptance, while an offer of 4,800,000 would only yield a 50% chance. The shopkeeper was impressed, noting that divinations were indeed very accurate and could genuinely be correct. Baiwu suggested that if the protagonist didn't believe him, he could simply call the other party right away and make the offer to try it out. The protagonist saw this as the perfect opportunity to test the power of that golden finger. The shopkeeper decided to take action and said he would call immediately to find out. 1 minute later, the shopkeeper was stunned to find that the other party had agreed without a moment's hesitation. He thanked his master, expressing that he truly was a divine predictor. The shopkeeper was so overjoyed that he began dancing alone, proclaiming that karma and retribution truly had their place in the world. He expressed his gratitude, stating that the master had bestowed upon him a benefit far beyond his expectations, and he offered 300,000 as compensation for divining such an extraordinary amount. Baiwu chose to accept, but made an effort to stay calm. However, he believed that 300,000 was an entirely unexpected stroke of luck. The shopkeeper quickly transferred 300,000 to him, and the protagonist admitted he felt a bit embarrassed. Inside, he was screaming with excitement. He had earned 300,000 so easily, and that was truly incredible. With such a high success rate, life felt like a complete cheat. The shopkeeper thanked him once more for everything he had done, and said he deserved every cent he had just earned. Baiwu said goodbye, explaining that he needed to leave. The shopkeeper thanked him once more and urged him to be careful on his way home. Baiwu believed this was an incredibly powerful opportunity. If he used this golden finger wisely, he could undoubtedly change his destiny and reach the pinnacle of his life. As soon as he left the store, he noticed that the dog that had crashed into the glass was still lying on the ground. He realized that the dog was a purebred and asked if it was possible that it had gotten lost. The golden finger declared that the probability was 100%. Baiwu watched as the dog played with the little ball. He approached it and explained that, thanks to the dog, he had earned a lot of money and would help it find its owner again. The dog is a loyal and loving companion, known for its playful nature and strong bond with humans. Whether it's fetching a ball, going for a walk, or simply cuddling on the couch, dogs bring joy and comfort to our lives. Their ability to understand and respond to human emotions makes them not just pets, but cherished members of the family. He threw the ball upward with great force. It hit several locations before returning to strike the dog itself on the then flew toward the protagonist's head. Baiwu believed that the dog's owner likely faced a significant ordeal every single day. The dog tugged at the protagonist, trying to pull him to the side. He thought the silly creature still needed to find its owner, but he had no idea where to begin the search. Suddenly, the dog started running at full speed, causing a disturbance for some people on the street. Baiwu chose to follow the dog, uncertain if it would truly find its owner, but feeling compelled to do so in order to prevent something bad from occurring. A short while later, in a park, a girl was taking a photo when a dog came running quickly toward her. Baiwu was captivated by the girl's beauty. He asked the golden finger what the probability was that the girl was the owner of the dog. The probability was 100%. He believed his luck had increased even more because the owner of the dog was a beautiful woman. He had only intended to help the dog find its owner for the dog's sake, and in doing so, coincidentally tested the amplification of the success rate. However, he never expected such a joyful encounter. The girl continued taking photos, which surprised him. Despite her dog having disappeared, she remained calm and carefree. Suddenly, she turned to look back at her dog. To his surprise, she asked if the protagonist had a dog as well. It made sense, as that was her dog. Yet she couldn't even recognize her own pet. This led him to question whether the certainty he felt about what he had seen could actually be false. The girl kept playing with the dog, remarking that its bark sounded just like her own dog's, though she still thought Oreo was a bit cuter. She went on to say that this dog looked quite silly, while hers was much smarter. Furthermore, her dog ate pure, natural dog food that cost $500 per bag, and its fur was softer and of higher quality than this dog's. The protagonist tried to pay attention, thinking that this beautiful girl was a bit naive. She looked at him and asked what was the matter. Bai-Wu explained that if everything was fine, then that was Oreo. The girl laughed, saying the joke wasn't funny at all because her dog had been securely tied to the bench. However, as soon as she glanced at the bench, she realized that the leash had snapped. 5 minutes later, the girl felt extremely embarrassed. She expressed her apologies for everything she had said and thanked him for his support. He then added her as a new friend. He reassured her that it was a good thing the dog hadn't gotten lost alone in the middle of the city. The truth was that he had found the pure girl who had never been in a relationship and had lived alone her entire life. He browsed through some of her posts, but felt a bit lost, as this was the first time he had added a beautiful girl as a friend. At least he knew he was in the right place. He looked at other posts and noticed that her dog was quite destructive. He noted that the dog was a bit wild and occasionally destroyed things. If it had been him, the landlord would have kicked him out long ago. He noticed that she seemed a bit embarrassed by that. He emphasized that he had no right to say those things to her, especially since his landlord had changed the lock on his rented apartment that day, leaving him without a roof over his head. The girl who was leaving asked why he needed to rent a place when it was better to live in his own house. She then said goodbye, mentioning that she needed to head back now. Bai-Wu started to consider his future because, with his newfound success rate, he no longer had to worry about rent. Getting rich and buying a house was now within his reach. He continued walking down the street, pondering how he could get rich and buy a house. Even after receiving demolition compensation, $300,000 was not enough for a down payment, and opportunities like that were rare. Because of this, he needed to find a stable and quick way to make money. The fastest options he considered included buying a house, playing the lottery, or engaging in stock trading. As he walked, he passed an antique treasure shop and he discovered that he could uncover hidden gems in antique stores. Several people offered him a variety of items. 2 people sitting nearby noticed that the boy walking by was clearly a rookie. He seemed to lack common sense and appeared quite oblivious. The protagonist crouched near a stall, realizing that those guys definitely saw him as an easy target, a naive beginner, which was why they were all trying to deceive him. The seller nearby explained that all the items for sale were heirlooms from his own family, as his surname was Li. He mentioned that his ancestors were believed to be descendants of Emperor Taizong of Tang, Li Shimin. The protagonist reassured him not to worry, explaining that he would simply take a good look at the items. He began to laugh, as no one expected that he, just a rookie, possessed the golden touch and could not be fooled by anyone. He expressed his curiosity about the success rate of purchasing genuine antiques at that stall, but the situation quickly changed. The protagonist grew a bit cautious, questioning whether everything was truly genuine, as it seemed impossible and something had to be amiss. He realized that his question had been phrased incorrectly due to a misunderstanding of the definition of antique. Who could determine the era of those antiques? They might not hold any value at all. As a result, he needed to establish a limit for the success rate. He inquired about the success rate of purchasing an antique valued at over $10,000 from that stall. The probability was shown as 0%. He decided to inquire about something valued at $5,000. The probability remained at 0%. As he continued to look, he noticed that an item from the Republic of China period was rated at 100%. Curious, he asked the seller for the price of that item. The seller described himself as a young man with excellent taste, claiming this antique was the most valuable because it had once belonged to Empress Dowager Cixi. Now, realizing that their paths were meant to cross, he offered it for $20,000. The protagonist prepared to leave, questioning whether the item was truly trash, as he doubted it was worth $200. He suspected the man was trying to trick him by attempting to sell it for $20,000. The seller persisted, urging the protagonist not to walk away, promising a 50% discount and offering it for $10,000. Bai-Wu simply ignored him and quickened his pace, convinced that fraud was everywhere. It appeared that the value limit for antiques could not be set too low, so he needed to establish a minimum limit of at least 10,000. He approached another person's stall and asked the golden finger about the success rate of purchasing an antique valued at 10,000 from that stall. The probability was reported as 10%. He decided to change the question and asked about 20,000. The rate remained steady at 10%. He decided to increase it to 30,000. The rate remained at 10%. He was impressed because, even at 50,000, it still represented 10%, and he thought he might discover a real treasure. The seller smiled and welcomed the customer with a friendly greeting. He thought it might be time to give that rookie his first lesson. He explained that buying antiques requires a discerning eye and emphasized that he conducts his business with integrity, unlike some unscrupulous merchants who demand absurd prices. However, he accidentally knocked it over, shattering it on the floor, and the likelihood of that item being valuable was non-existent. Bai Wu intervened. He stated that there was no need for recommendations because he had already made his choice. Then, he pointed to an antique that had a 100% probability of being valued at $50,000. Bai Wu believed he was no rookie chasing a dream of hidden treasure. With his impressive success rate, he was the golden touch of the antique street and destined to become the foremost master of antique appraisal. As a result, the seller was witnessing the dawn of a true legend. The seller felt a bit confused, unsure of what was happening, as the rookie seemed completely oblivious. Just because something appeared old didn't mean it actually was. The item was a fake freshly pulled from the kiln. He pondered how he could possibly raise the price of such worthless trash. Bai Wu noticed that the seller was behaving oddly and was clearly attempting to take advantage of him by inflating the price. This happened because he showed interest too quickly, which he should not have done. He got carried away by the success rate and became overly excited. The seller mentioned that he had quite an appetite for antiques, but he should heed the advice of an expert. He suggested taking a look at the porcelain vase first, emphasizing that buying antiques was primarily about discernment and secondarily about connection. He could see a strong connection between the two of them, which was why he offered honest advice. He pointed out the glaze of the vase and the smooth molding, the entirely handcrafted work. The clear sound showcased its exceptional quality. He emphasized that it was not expensive, costing only 50,000, and if he managed to resell it, he would likely make a substantial profit. Bai Wu wore a satisfied expression to deceive the seller. He pondered how much the vase could be worth and why the seller was so focused on it. Instead of promoting the wine vessel, the seller was recommending the broken vase instead, and he likely had no idea that there was actually a potential treasure worth $50,000 hidden there. The protagonist chose to refuse, stating that he believed buying antiques was about connection. While he acknowledged the beauty of the porcelain vase, he felt it held no personal connection for him. He held the wine vessel and remarked that he thought it looked very appealing. The seller inquired whether he was truly interested in the bronze wine vessel. From the looks of it, he had a good eye, having discovered that gem in the countryside for just 8,000. If he truly wanted it, he could sell it at cost price and asked if the seller would accept the offer of 8,000, neither a cent more nor a cent less. The protagonist was tempted to accept the offer. After all, compared to 50,000, 8,000 seemed like just pocket change, and the seller appeared completely unaware of the value of the bronze wine vessel. He asked the golden finger what the likelihood was that the seller understood its true worth. The probability was shown as 0%. Bai Wu believed he had anticipated this moment. With the success rate in his grasp, all hidden intentions were now within his reach. This allowed him to strategize on how to manipulate the negotiation while pretending to be an inexperienced rookie. After all, no matter how complex the quotes were, as long as he understood the final outcome, he would be unbeatable. He used the success rate to determine the minimum price the seller would accept. He inquired about the probability of the seller agreeing to sell the vessel for 4,000, and the probability was absolute. That impressed him. 2,000 was also equivalent to 100%, so he decided to lower it to 1,000. The probability decreased to 80%. He believed it didn't matter much, as he knew he couldn't be too greedy, so he was already aware of what to do. He informed the seller that 8,000 was somewhat expensive and inquired if they could lower the price a bit. The seller believed he had purchased many items at a very low price, and no matter how cheaply he sold them, his profit would still be substantial. He told the protagonist that 8,000 for such a valuable item was not expensive. However, having a connection with someone who understood its worth was more important, so the protagonist could decide on the price. Bai Wu made an offer of 2,000. The seller was surprised, believing that this boy truly was 2,000 was still a significant profit. Since the seller had fallen silent, Baiwu decided to press a bit further and asked if he truly would not accept the 2,000. If that was the case, they should just forget about this conversation. The seller finally relented, agreeing that 2,000 was a great price. In reality, he had purchased 2 items for 8,000 and sold the other one to a beautiful lady just the day before. He swiftly packed the vessel and handed it to the protagonist. The individual who transferred the payment, Baiwu, has departed. He laughed, believing he had struck it rich. The seller smiled widely, having made a fortune after purchasing the item at an extremely low price. An item worth only a few yuan sold for 2,000. It was incredibly easy money, turning trash into profit. A rookie attempts to emulate the professionals while discovering hidden treasures. That boy was too reckless, considering that a profit of 2,000 was still substantial for him. He celebrated alongside the seller, noting that just yesterday, a lady had purchased a wine vessel for 9,000, while now that foolish boy had bought another vessel for only 2,000. The buyer was not as savvy as the seller, and that money had come far too easily. The other seller questioned why he was boasting so much, and old Wang was asked if that was the young girl who had purchased the bronze wine pot for 9,000 yesterday. The one he had just tricked might have been there to cause trouble. However, Wang stated that this situation truly posed no issue for him, as money and goods exchanged were no longer a concern. As soon as the girl approached, Wang quickly stated that his was a small business, so all sales were final and there were no refunds. The girl, feeling a bit lost, asked if he was going crazy and then inquired about its location. Wang, feeling somewhat confused, asked her what she meant. She inquired about the location of the other bronze wine vessel, offering to pay 10,000, or if he preferred 50,000 for it. Wang began trembling and asked how much she had revealed. They questioned whether the wine vessel was truly as valuable as claimed, and how that rookie could possibly know something like that. The girl found his behavior somewhat strange and suspected that the seller might be trying to inflate the price. Since she really wanted the item, she asked if he truly thought the offer was insufficient. She mentioned that if he wanted, she could increase her bid and offered 60,000. However, the seller did not respond. She raised it to 80,000. The 2 sellers were taken aback by this. The girl grew irritated by the complete lack of response. She asked the boss if he wasn't hearing what she was saying. Wang began beating his chest, declaring that the hunter had just been caught by the prey, calling it foolishness since he had just lost 80,000. Another seller laughed, stating that he had never bowed to anyone in business. However, today he had truly learned something. Buying a pile of trash and selling it for 80,000 was indeed impressive. Wang asked if she would pay $100,000 for the vessel, and she accepted without hesitation, creating an atmosphere of confidence and assurance. The seller fell backward in surprise. The seller next to him then told the young woman that he wanted to share something, as old Wang had just sold the wine vessel. He asked if she could guess how much it had sold for, revealing that it was $2,000. An old item had been sold for $2,000. The girl asked if it had truly already been sold. Wang stood up and told her to wait just a moment, assuring her he would be right back. Suddenly, he heard loud shouting up ahead about something being sold for $300,000. People were saying that the boy's luck was extraordinary, especially since old Li was offering that amount for the bronze wine vessel. The seller next to Wang mentioned that people were discussing the bronze wine vessel, suggesting it might be the same one they had been referring to. The woman grew irritated, declaring that this was a huge nuisance and wondering which brat had stolen her deal with such terrible luck. However, Baiwu declined the sum of 300,000. The people grew uneasy, believing he was being overly greedy. Old Li offered 400,000, stating that he would not go any higher. However, Baiwu refused once more and started to put away the bronze vessel. Li urged him not to rush and inquired about the price the protagonist wanted for it, assuring him that he would listen attentively. The protagonist mentioned that this gentleman was an expert, so he, as a young man, humbly requested that they become friends. He offered a fixed price of 500,000 and said he would let the rest go because he genuinely valued their friendship. Li was truly impressed. He expressed that this was truly impressive and thanked him sincerely for the opportunity to meet. Wang could hardly believe that his vessel was being sold for 500,000. The others informed Wang that they had heard the boy paid only 2,000 for the vase, and regardless of who sold it to him, that person was likely feeling completely devastated at this moment. They wondered why he appeared so sad. Wang wondered how that could be possible, given his many years in the business. How could he have sold something so valuable for such a low price? The girl from earlier stated that 500,000 was unacceptable and proposed 550,000 instead. The protagonist looked at her and thought she had fair skin, a beautiful face, and long legs, with an appearance and temperament that were simply incredible. Her proud demeanor revealed that she was undoubtedly a young lady from a wealthy family, a true goddess of the world. In the past, he might not have even dared to glance at her twice. With his current success rate, finding romance was as easy as drinking a glass of water. Meanwhile, the girl felt a twinge of annoyance, questioning why the boy was staring at her, considering he was nothing more than a loser. After all, if her grandfather hadn't been so stubborn in insisting that the wine vessel belonged to her, she wouldn't have had to endure all that trouble. Yet, she was determined to obtain it, regardless of the cost. Baiwu glanced at the wine pot and realized that the girl was clearly interested in it, which meant he could sell it for an even higher price than he had anticipated. He glanced a bit further back. He saw the seller who had sold him the wine vessel, stating that the vessel he had purchased for 2,000 was actually worth more than 550,000. As soon as the crowd heard that, they began to mock Wang, making him die of shame. The girl continued to pressure the protagonist, offering 550,000 and asking whether he intended to sell it or not. Li pointed out that she was being a bit unreasonable, reminding her of an old saying on those streets: whoever arrived first had to be the first to buy. The girl laughed and told the old gentleman that they had not yet made a deal, and the agreement was still open. Li found the girl quite annoying, and her behavior felt oddly familiar to him. The two of them turned their attention to the protagonist. He laughed, stating that he wasn't the one interested in buying it, suggesting that the two of them could discuss the matter further and come to an agreement. The girl believed the protagonist was merely another person attempting to manipulate the antique market rules to inflate prices. It seemed he genuinely thought others were too foolish to recognize the scheme he was trying to pull. Li offered 560,000. However, the girl offered 570,000. The old man reiterated the offer. The young woman offered 600,000. Li looked at her and remarked that she seemed a bit familiar, inquiring about her connection to the old ghost Demen. The girl mentioned that Demen was her grandfather and asked if the old gentleman recognized him. Li began laughing, explaining that it was a case of mistaken identity. He emphasized that he was a friend of her grandfather and that he had wanted her to purchase that wine vessel. He formally introduced himself as Li Weiguo, a professor from the history department at Hengcheng University, just like her grandfather. She recognized him as Grandpa Li, her grandfather's childhood friend, and mentioned that he was doing well and went for a morning run every day. The protagonist grew slightly irritated and interrupted the two, asking if they still planned to buy it. The young woman agreed, and she asked Weiguo to return home and take care of things, suggesting that he visit her grandfather for tea whenever he had the chance. She assured him that she would personally pick him up if needed. A short while later, she transferred the payment to the protagonist. He believed that, although the calculation had resulted in a small error, the profit margin was still more than 300 times. Now, he had become a millionaire overnight, thanks to the golden touch of Antique Street. Why should he write face-slapping novels when he was the true male protagonist of a comeback story in this manhwa? He looked at her and felt enchanted once more. She asked if she would like to exchange WeChat information. She was somewhat taken aback by that. The protagonist smiled and mentioned that she was quite interested in antiques. She suggested that if he found another good item nearby, he could reach out to her. Di Qingting found the pickup line to be incredibly cheesy, as the protagonist was both repulsive and amusing. He was like a true toad, yearning for swan meat. He attempted to charm her by calling her Diatu, but she stepped back, asking why he had called her that. Diatu meant little girl or something similar. She began to wonder why he was being so friendly. With just one stroke of luck and finding a treasure, he already believed he was the chosen one. No one dared to get close to her. She felt a bit irritated, insisting that he shouldn't call her by name as if he were older than she was. The protagonist asked the golden finger what the success rate was for her being older than him. The probability was 0%. He started to see her as someone truly deserving of being a pampered, arrogant, and proud young lady. However, he possessed the ultimate trump card, his impressive success rate, and he was determined to showcase his abilities. He asked what the chances were that she was 20 years old, and the answer was 100%. He believed that both he and she were 20 years old, but since his birthday was September 30th, hers could be different. He asked if she was born in May, but that possibility was unlikely. He felt confused, trying to understand the situation, especially since she was younger than him. However, she hadn't been born in the last 3 months, so it could simply be a coincidence that they shared the same birthday. That resulted in a perfect score of 100%. Jing Ting asked him which game he was playing. Bai Wu urged her to take her time. He continued making calculations, recalling that he had been born at 3:23 in the afternoon and that she was younger than him, which meant she must have been born sometime between 9 o'clock and midnight. However, the probability he calculated came out to 0. He kept asking questions until he finally discovered the truth, and it turned out to be a remarkable coincidence. There was only a 1-minute difference between their births. Since she was trying to act like an older sister and assert her dominance over him, he was determined to break her spirit. Qingting became a bit irritated, expressing that he found the situation completely inexplicable. Began to walk away, but Baiwu called out to her, referring to her as Dia-tu once more. He insisted that she shouldn't dismiss his words as nonsense. He believed he was merely offering her an appetizer to frighten her. He closed his eyes, pretending to concentrate, and mentioned that she was turning 20 that year, having been born at the end of September. He then asked if that was correct. She was impressed and asked how he knew that. The protagonist stated that it was very easy because he had already calculated it. This only made her more irritated, as she found the arrogance on that boy's face unbearable, especially since he was trying to discuss metaphysics with her. She kept ignoring him, insisting that he was merely trying to put on a mystical act as she walked away. However, the protagonist believed he had something even more precise and surprising. He stated that it was very easy. He just needed to recalculate. He emphasized that she was born on September 30th around 30:30 in the afternoon. This caused her to freeze as she asked how he could do such a thing. Everyone was impressed, asking if it was really true as the boy spoke with great precision. They questioned whether it was possible for him to truly know fortune-telling. Others noted that judging by the girl's reaction, he had likely hit the mark. However, on the other hand, some people became irritated, claiming he was trying to sell divination in the 21st century. They believed the young man had likely gathered her information earlier to pursue her, labeling his behavior as perverted. Bai Wu remained silent, believing that a pervert would not notice such details, as he was now ready to reveal his true abilities. He told her he would recalculate, emphasizing that she had not been born at 3:30, but at 3:24. She believed it was time to deliver the final blow, revealing that she had been born on September 30th in the afternoon at 3:24:36. So surprised by this, she took out her phone with trembling hands and called her mother, who responded with concern, asking what was wrong. She asked her mother what time she had been born. Her mother replied that she had arrived around 3:30 in the afternoon on September 30th, but then became a bit confused, wondering if her daughter truly did not remember her own birthday. However, Qingting clarified that wasn't the case and asked her to be a little more specific, questioning whether she had been born at 3:24. Her mother admitted she didn't remember either and promised to check the birth certificate in the safe right away. 3 minutes later, her mother returned and revealed that she had been born at 3 hours, 24 minutes, and 36 seconds. Impressed, her mother asked how she knew that, but Qingting was even more shocked by the discovery. She stared at the protagonist, Baiwu, who called her Dia-tu again. He mentioned that if she wanted to know something, she only needed to ask, as her intense gaze was making him a little shy. Qingting turned around angrily, expressing that she shouldn't have let her curiosity get the better of her and wasted her time on that boy. The protagonist stepped in front of her and apologized, explaining that he was joking and had only made a divination earlier. She smiled with anger, and she tapped the protagonist's chest with her finger, remarking that he had been precise, even getting the seconds right. How could he call that mere divination? She challenged him, asking if he truly believed she was foolish. Baiwu became even more enchanted, believing she was truly a goddess-level beauty. Even in moments of anger, her beauty remained strikingly captivating. Baiwu apologized and promised to tell the truth from that point forward, emphasizing that he had indeed calculated everything. Qingting questioned whether he was a fortune teller or a scam artist. The protagonist stated that not all seers were scammers and inquired whether she had not observed the methods he had employed. He moved closer to her and whispered that, if he wasn't mistaken, she was wearing black today. This left her even more shocked, prompting her to tell him to stop talking. She glared at him with anger, and the protagonist began to wonder if it was possible that she had never had a boyfriend before. The probability of that event occurring was 100%. Qingting asked what he was looking at and warned him not to get too close. Baiwu believed that after years of seclusion, the girl did not like men and was not dating, so he wondered what the chances were that she might be a lesbian. The probability appeared to be 100%, but the protagonist insisted that it couldn't be true, as lesbians were infinitely wonderful. Qingting felt embarrassed and began to tremble as he asked what had been said. Everyone around them was surprised, gazing at her. The protagonist laughed, stating that he had expressed exactly what she understood. She rushed over and pulled him into a corner. As soon as they reached an alley, she pushed him against the wall, placing her foot beside him, and asked how he knew about her relationship with another girl. Baiwu simply stated that he had calculated that as well. She said it was nonsense. The protagonist asked if she truly did not believe him. He moved even closer, claiming he could even calculate that she had 3 moles. For him, determining someone's sexual orientation was remarkably simple. Qingting couldn't say anything in response to that. She chose to add him as a friend. The protagonist assured her that everything was fine now and promised to reach out again if he discovered anything worthwhile. Before leaving, he emphasized that she could also request divinations or consultations. As he walked away, he marveled at the incredible success rate, realizing that it allowed him to even uncover people's secrets. He truly had not anticipated meeting a lesbian and accidentally exposing her with the success rate. As he walked, he noticed Wei Guo making a phone call and wondered who he was speaking to. Could it be that he had overheard everything? He then asked about the likelihood of Qingting being discovered by her family for being a lesbian. The probability initially stood at 0%, but the success rate began to shift, increasing to 20%. He was confused and asked once more whether she had been discovered. Then, he suddenly had a brilliant idea. Perhaps this change was a result of his interaction with that girl. He continued to look at Wei Guo, thinking that something was off. He questioned the success rate, wondering if it was possible that the old man was reaching out to her family to reveal everything. The probability reached 100%, and the protagonist believed he had not acted intentionally. She remained standing in the alley and received the protagonist's communication. She believed that her family had likely already uncovered her secret. She felt frightened by this. She ran to the side, searching for the protagonist, but she couldn't spot him. She sent a message asking what he meant by that statement. He inquired about the success rate of her parents contacting her within half an hour. The probability was confirmed as positive, prompting him to reduce the time to 5 minutes. The likelihood had risen to 100%. He sent her a message stating that he had just completed another divination, and she congratulated him, mentioning that her family would call for a conversation in 5 minutes. 5 minutes later, her phone finally rang. As soon as she answered, her mother asked her to come back, as she and her father wanted to ask her some questions. Baiwu took a deep breath and realized she needed to explain herself clearly. In truth, parents embodied unconditional love, always offering it freely. He had left home alone, carrying the weight of success on his shoulders. While that was merely a mantra for others, his reality was already different. It was a pity to encounter a beautiful girl yet feel unable to flirt with her. Suddenly, his phone started ringing as well. As soon as he answered, he asked his mother why she was calling him so suddenly, and if something had occurred. The protagonist was taken aback when she realized what she truly wanted, to arrange a blind date. He felt irritated, stating that he was only 20 years old and wasn't ready for such a commitment. Despite his initial refusal, as always, his mother managed to convince him otherwise. At 8:15 in the evening, he was already at the restaurant. Believing that a true gentleman should be polite, he decided to arrive a little early. He looked at the girl's photo and thought that with her mature and charming demeanor, she must have many admirers. So why would she need a blind date? As soon as the woman entered, the protagonist glanced over. He noticed Qingting appearing somewhat uncomfortable as she followed a woman. He was surprised and asked what she was doing there as well. He wondered who was calling him, questioning if it could be what he was thinking. The success rate indicated that the blind date was with Qingting's partner. The rate was 100%. He wondered if this blind date could also trigger a chain reaction, stemming from his accidental exposure of her. The probability was undeniable. He observed the scene and noted that one person wanted to break up while the others sought reconciliation. The plot was becoming increasingly melodramatic. Qingting's girlfriend, or possibly his ex-girlfriend, had become a topic of interest. She glanced at the protagonist and asked Qing to release her arm, which caused her to cry. Baiwu was taken by surprise. Because that girl's gaze could be deadly, the girl approached Baiwu. She introduced herself as Mu Yer and expressed that she found the protagonist very charming and handsome. She expressed her desire to be with him. Everyone around them was taken aback by such a declaration. Even him. On the other hand, Qingting was heartbroken, weeping for her companion. Baiwu looked at Qingting and expressed his confusion. Ye asked if he didn't like her. The protagonist tried to explain that it wasn't just her beauty and excellence that captivated him. Rather, he suspected that a honey trap might have been at play. Ye moved even closer and said she was being very serious. This was not a joke. He inquired about the success rate, questioning whether it was certain that this was not a trap. The probability was recorded at 0%. He noted that he had always believed this was not a fortunate event that had simply fallen from the sky. Ye pushed him, locking eyes with him, and suddenly kissed the protagonist, making poor Ching Ting feel utterly worthless. Ye fell onto Baiwu and urged him to go. Baiwu asked where they were headed. She mentioned that he was going to her house to meet her parents. Ching Ting fled the scene. Baiwu realized that Ye was clearly unwilling, and although this situation was a trap for him, she was likely using him as a shield to force Ching Ting to back down. The success rate indicated that this was 100% accurate. Baiwu felt that, despite having benefited, being manipulated by her for no reason was somewhat unpleasant. The two stared at each other, and the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Additionally, the protagonist wondered how he could know she was a lesbian if he didn't have a clear success rate. He realized that remaining silent was also a form of deception. Yer stood up. She asked him whether he was coming or not. Baiwu felt a bit confused and inquired if she truly wanted to introduce him to her parents. The success rate reached an impressive 100%. He remained suspicious, questioning whether this was serious, whether she truly wasn't just using him as a shield, and whether she genuinely wanted a date or a boyfriend, or if she was simply having him meet her parents as her boyfriend to ease the tension in the situation. Every question yielded a success rate of 100%. Yer called out to him with tears in her eyes, turned around, and asked what he wanted, as he had already taken advantage of the situation and was now truly ready to give up. The protagonist felt a twinge of irritation, finding the situation quite annoying. With her beauty granting her the freedom to do as she pleased, shouldn't he be the one gaining the advantage in all of this? He saw that she was crying and grew a bit sentimental. He stated that he did not regret what had happened. However, he felt a bit bothered because he hadn't even agreed to go out with her. He wondered why all the girls he wanted to flirt with were lesbians, but he couldn't decipher what she was thinking. Later, at her house, as soon as she arrived, she called her father and mother to let them know she was there. Her mother seemed irritated and asked why she was back so soon when she was supposed to be on a blind date. Yer introduced Baiwu as her boyfriend, and the protagonist greeted her warmly. However, he felt a bit apprehensive, worried that his soft heart had led him astray. He realized he had been brought to that house without making a conscious decision, and now he found himself uncertain. Wondered if taking on another hot potato also counted as rescuing a damsel in distress. Her mother quickly shifted her attitude, smiling as she asked if she really had a boyfriend and why she hadn't mentioned it before. Suddenly, someone in the room shouted, questioning whether that had really happened. The protagonist was completely startled, fearing that amidst all the commotion, someone was approaching with a knife in hand. As soon as her father arrived, he grabbed Baiwu by the arm and remarked that the young man seemed quite lively. Yaw revealed that she and the protagonist had actually dated in high school but broke up due to their studies. She hadn't expected to run into him again at a blind date. Her father stared at the protagonist while her mother, looking pleased, remarked that now she understood why Yer's grades had slipped a bit during her final year. Her father pulled the protagonist away, questioning why they were discussing that, and urging him to come inside quickly. He then asked his wife to prepare some of her finest special dishes for the evening. As he was being dragged, the protagonist realized that the two of them were so enthusiastic that, had he not known better, he might have thought this was a honey trap. Her father led them to a room and told the protagonist they could sit there for a while. He and his wife prepared some dishes for them to eat. As soon as he left the room, Baiwu asked if she was truly that man's biological daughter. The probability was absolute, standing at 100%. The two burst into laughter just as her mother entered the room. Her father quickly returned, asking his wife what she was doing, and pushed her aside, insisting that the two of them could continue freely with whatever they had been doing. She closed the door again. In the hallway, she could hear her father speaking loudly and enthusiastically to her mother, insisting that they needed to prepare a soup that would give that young man vigor. She felt a bit embarrassed, realizing that this was the first time her parents had met her boyfriend, and perhaps they were a little too excited. The protagonist felt a bit confused. That girl's parents had become extremely enthusiastic and proactive during their very first visit. Outside the room, her father and mother were both straining to hear what was happening inside. However, her father was somewhat concerned, questioning why there was no action, as he had clearly taught that young man about the great opportunity that lay before him. Her mother grew a bit concerned and asked the father if he truly wasn't worried that the young man might become so greedy that he would take advantage of their poor daughter. The father rushed over to her and covered her mouth, urging her to speak more quietly. He explained that if she didn't take a risk, the bear cub wouldn't be able to catch the bear. He held the cleaver, confident they wouldn't be able to tell if it was fake or real without trying it out. Moreover, they had no reason to worry, as he was fully prepared. If that guy dared to make a move, he would face the consequences. The protagonist attempted to draw closer to her, but she took a small step back, frightened. Bai Wu explained that he simply wanted to sit down and talk with her for a while. However, Ye, still shaken by the situation, apologized and expressed that she might need more time to adjust to the new relationship. The protagonist stepped back slightly and acknowledged that he might have been a bit presumptuous. He offered to give her more space if she was truly feeling nervous about the situation. She felt a bit surprised. She thanked him and assured him that it was fine, expressing her determination to work hard and adapt. Bai Wu couldn't help but think that Ye was truly a beautiful woman with no flaws, and if only she were genuinely his girlfriend, everything would be better. He decided to ask his ability what the success rate would be if he held her hand at that moment, and the answer was 80%. He decided to ask for a hug. The possibility decreased to 76%. He briefly entertained the idea that he had saved the galaxy, but quickly dismissed it, believing she only wanted a fake boyfriend to deceive her parents. After all, he was a healthy, morally upright, and excellent young man. How could he possibly engage in something like that? He believed he should not get involved in that mess, and that it would be better for the girl to confront herself honestly. He attempted to move closer to take her hand, but ended up stumbling and falling. Her father rushed in, shouting and asking what was wrong and if she was okay. However, as soon as he assessed the situation, he was taken aback. Ye shouted, asking her father what he was doing there. Her mother attempted to smooth things over by scolding her husband, reassuring her daughter that it was a relief to see she was perfectly fine, as her father tended to get scared very easily. Bai Wu wondered why he was holding a cleaver in his hands. This only heightened his anxiety, as he questioned what was happening. He had done nothing, and had been dragged into this for no reason. So why was the man entering with a cleaver in his hands? He took a deep breath and stated that he had not changed his mind, but she suddenly realized that her father clearly did not believe he was dating his own daughter. The wife scolded her husband, questioning his sanity. They were merely testing whether he was a substitute, so why had her father entered with a cleaver in his hand? He explained that he felt a bit afraid, because even though that boy was just a substitute, he could still be utilized to try and accomplish something more. Meanwhile, the protagonist felt increasingly confused, having been inexplicably dragged into this situation to pretend to be a boyfriend, only to be treated by her parents as if he were a pervert. No one would believe this twist if he shared it with anyone. Ye asked if he was okay. The protagonist looked at her, realizing that, ultimately, this was a family matter, and he preferred not to take on that role any longer. It was better to leave while he still could. He stood up and looked at her, suggesting they discuss this in more detail later, as it was already getting late. Ye tried to stop the protagonist, questioning whether he truly wanted to go back on his word now. Bai Wu remained serious and asked if she truly believed that a small act could deceive her parents. He was already making it clear that he no longer wanted to cooperate with the performance. They were participating out of concern for her, but she only intended to use him to deceive them. He emphasized that open communication with her parents was the best way to resolve issues. Ye was taken aback by this. She held the protagonist's arm, pleading with him to help her, just this once. Bai Wu smiled, realizing that he was now the one holding all the cards. Suddenly, the two of them started speaking very loudly, causing her father and mother to become worried. Her father asked why it seemed like the two were arguing. Her mother, feeling a bit pleased, replied that only young couples argued, and that it was all her father's fault for referring to him as a substitute. Suddenly, she realized that her husband had frightened the protagonist with a knife, which had led to their argument. Now they needed to find a solution, as young couples often broke up after such conflicts. They rushed to the room, but the protagonist opened the door and stepped out with a serious expression, saying nothing. As he walked, he realized he could no longer remain there. This situation was not helping the girl. It was harming her. Her mother rushed over to the protagonist, urging him not to put on his shoes, as she had accidentally gotten them wet while preparing the soup. Bai Wu was taken aback by this. When he realized that his shoes were indeed wet, she came out of the room and asked her mother how the soup she had been preparing in the kitchen had spilled. Her father agreed, saying that his wife was being very careless. He then pointed out that the protagonist's shoes were wet and asked how he planned to get home. The mother suggested that he spend a night there until his shoes dried the following day. Bai Wu believed he had explained everything clearly to Ye. Now, how she would handle the situation depended solely on her. Her father also looked at the protagonist and asked why he could not stay there. Bai Wu looked at them and explained that he needed to go to the hospital to care for a patient, the son of his 7th grade aunt's niece, who was unwell. He needed to say goodbye. Both the father and mother felt a bit confused after the lengthy explanation about the aunt, the daughter, and everything else. A short while later, the protagonist lay in bed, contemplating how making money was far more reliable. He believed that as long as he continued to earn, his happiness would remain intact. With that in mind, he resolved to return tomorrow to buy more antiques. The next morning, Wang was cleaning his artifacts, reflecting on his carelessness that had cost him money to a rookie. He realized he needed to seize a great opportunity now. He noticed that someone had paused in front of his shop. He looked up with a smile on his face and asked if there was anything the person liked in the store. But when he looked ahead, he realized it was the protagonist. Bai Wu inquired whether he had traveled to the countryside to gather a few more antiques. Wang smiled and told the protagonist he had arrived at the perfect time, as he had managed to acquire more antiques overnight. He then asked if the protagonist would like to take a look. He believed that with every product he purchased, he could achieve an enormous profit. Bai Wu asked Wang to show him the interesting things he had. He pointed to several items, explaining that these were what he had purchased in a village overnight. He had spent $50,000 to purchase that porcelain set. He emphasized that he had specifically asked the villagers for information and learned that the family had prospered with Lisimon during the late Sui dynasty and flourished during the era of Empress Wu. Those few porcelain pieces could be quite valuable. Bai Wu inquired whether it was Tang San Cai. Wang confirmed that was exactly right, whether referring to the craftsmanship, glaze, or other aspects. Those few porcelain pieces were likely Tang San Chai, and given that the protagonist was a longtime customer, they could negotiate a favorable deal. Bai Wu inquired about the price of those pieces. Wang mentioned a price of 60 and asked for his opinion on it. The protagonist's eyes widened in surprise as he remarked on how incredible the seller was for charging only $60 for that porcelain set. He believed the porcelain set exhibited excellent craftsmanship, as purchasing it directly from a factory would cost around $200. Wang attempted to clarify that it wasn't exactly as the protagonist thought, and that there may have been some misunderstanding. Bai Wu interrupted the seller, stating that there was no need for an explanation, as 60 was indeed very cheap. He added that if he purchased all those porcelain pieces for that price, his conscience would not be at peace. Wang expressed that Bai Wu was touching his heart. The protagonist proposed a new deal, not wanting Wang to lose so much money. He requested some time to think it over and come up with a fairer price. He asked the golden finger whether the porcelain pieces were truly genuine. The probability was only 14.28%, which the protagonist believed was to be expected, as they were all fake. Suddenly, he realized he had made a miscalculation. If the probability was 14.28%, that meant 1 out of 7. Among the 7 porcelain pieces, there may have been one true antique. If that piece is authentic, its value could reach tens of millions. The golden finger claimed it was 100% genuine, with a 90% probability that its value could reach tens of millions. The protagonist completed his inspection and asked the seller for a fair price, inquiring about the cost of the set. Wang believed he had struck gold this time. He stated that for just 600,000 he could acquire the entire set. Bai Wu asked if that was truly the price. The seller replied that if Bai Wu thought the price was too high, he could offer a discount and adjust it to 500,000. Bai Wu agreed that the price was excellent and decided to proceed with the transfer immediately. He quickly transferred $500,000, took all the pieces, and ran off. Wang found all of it very suspicious and questioned whether there was truly a genuine piece among the porcelain set. However, he soon changed his mind, believing it was impossible since that porcelain set had been sold wholesale from the shelves of the Tang San Kai workshop in the mountain village. He felt a surge of happiness, realizing that young people today truly believed they were the fortunate protagonists of their own stories. After all, it was nearly impossible to find such a rare and genuine treasure at any street stall, and from the looks of it, that boy was still too young to grasp that reality. Selling that set for $500,000 when he had purchased everything for only $1,500 was easy money, especially since the rookie was still just a rookie, playing around with him. Suddenly, a car crashed right into the center of the shop. A girl stepped out of the car and called out to Wang, saying that the Tang San Kai imitation she had sold him for $1,500 the night before, she now wanted to buy back for $1 million. Upon hearing this, Wang realized he had once again lost a winning ticket. The girl continued to plead, explaining that one of the porcelain pieces in that set held great significance for her grandfather and was not for sale. She wanted to buy it back. Wang explained that it wasn't that he didn't want to sell it. Rather, he had already packed it up and sold it to someone else. The seller beside him agreed and wondered how that old man had managed to deceive the boy. In reality, the boy had spent $500,000 on that new item from some craft workshops and was completely foolish. He emphasized his envy of Wang, wondering when he would also find someone so naive. Wang replied that it was normal for young people to be impatient. The girl began to cry, saying that everything was over now. She realized that in her attempt to playfully eat chicken, she had placed that porcelain piece up for sale. Now she felt doomed, and today marked the moment when her intelligence hit rock bottom. Wang tried to comfort her, urging her not to cry. Although that porcelain piece was a proud creation of her grandfather, it was ultimately just a replica. Because of this, she only needed to apologize to her grandfather, and everything would be fine. The girl grew irritated and demanded to know who claimed it was only a replica. Among the porcelain set, one piece was genuine, passed down through her family. Someone had once offered $10 million for it, but her grandmother had refused to sell, unwilling to part with it at that time. Wang was in disbelief. The seller next to him started mocking him once more, claiming that Wang had truly outdone himself. Just yesterday, he had sold a bronze wine vessel valued at $600,000 for a mere $2,000. Today, unfortunately, he had allowed a genuine item worth $10 million to slip away for only $500,000. The girl asked where the man who bought the porcelain had gone. Wang replied that he had headed toward Guyuan Pavilion. Meanwhile, within the pavilion, the protagonist was already having the item examined. The appraiser noted that the expression was vivid and the glaze was flawless, meaning it was in excellent condition. The man analyzing the piece noted that he had a camel in that exact shape inside his house, making it extremely rare for a 1,000-year-old porcelain item to be so identical. He emphasized that the protagonist had mentioned Wang sold it to him because he believed his granddaughter had secretly taken it out to sell. The protagonist believed that Tong Sankai had been handed down from the Tang dynasty and was indeed the same item the man claimed as his own. Perhaps that item truly belonged to the old man. Golden Finger confirmed with a 100% possibility. Bai Wu nearly choked to death because of it. The old man became startled and asked what was wrong. The protagonist reassured him that it was nothing serious, explaining that he had accidentally burned himself. Bai Wu wondered if it was possible that the seller had stolen the item, but the probability of that happening was zero. The protagonist grew concerned, realizing that if the seller was not the culprit, then perhaps the old man's granddaughter had sold it to him. The probability of that occurring was 100%. Bai Wu looked at the old man, realizing that he had raised a prodigious granddaughter. The old man explained that the piece would likely sell for $12 million at auction. However, he expressed his desire to buy it for $9 million, asking the protagonist if that price was acceptable. Bai Wu believed that $9 million was a significant sum, especially considering that the piece had originally belonged to someone else. Bai Wu accepted the offer, stating that he would comply with the gentleman's wishes. The old man reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. He handed the protagonist his business card, saying that if he found any good items in the future, he could contact him at any time. Bai Wu expressed his gratitude. He left the pavilion while glancing at the old man's name, Choi Yongkang. The girl jumped out of the car. The protagonist was startled to realize she was running so fast that she could fall at any moment. He realized that the likelihood of her falling was certain. She stopped and listened, taking a moment to gather herself. Nodding in agreement, she understood the importance of being cautious to avoid any accidents. Introducing herself as Choi Xiaoxiao, she declared that she would never fall for anyone. The pickup line he used was so ridiculous that it made her wonder if he had been a lifelong virgin, a true Iron Man. The protagonist believed that his good intentions were being misinterpreted as malice. He felt he was merely trying to offer her a warning. In his eyes, it seemed that this girl truly did not value kindness, but he suddenly remembered that her name was Choi Xiaoxiao. He asked the Golden Finger if she was the prodigious granddaughter of the old man who had sold her family's treasure. The probability appeared to be 100%. He found it hard to believe it was merely a coincidence to encounter her there. As Xiaoxiao walked briskly, she stumbled over a stone and fell directly into the protagonist's embrace. Startled, she wondered what kind of trick he had used and how she had truly fallen for it. The people around them grew uncomfortable, expressing that society's morals were in decline. They urged them not to be so unrestrained in broad daylight, deeming such behavior indecent. Xiaoxiao felt embarrassed and urged the protagonist to let her go quickly so she could continue on her way. However, Bai Wu opened his hands and said that she should be the only one to let go, as she was completely clinging to him. Upon realizing this, she stepped back and Bai Wu stated that if there was nothing else to discuss, he would leave immediately. She shouted for him to stop. The protagonist raised his hands, insisting he hadn't done anything and pleading with her not to try to extort him. She took his phone, telling him he was very lucky because she needed to handle some urgent matters. He had to leave his contact information so she could settle things with him next time. Baiwu believed he had simply offered her a helping hand to stand up. He glanced at his phone and realized that she had added him as a friend. He began walking, surprised that he had not anticipated meeting a girl there who would add him. Now that he had some money, he felt bold enough to spend a little more extravagantly. He is contemplating whether to buy a car or a house first. Wang asked the protagonist whom he had sold the porcelain to and how much he had sold it for. Baiwu replied that he had sold it to Boss Shay for 9 million. Wang simply said it was fine. The protagonist thought the fat man was truly impressive. Remaining so unshaken after losing such a significant amount of money, Wang simply smiled, assuring that he would handle that brat appropriately. Xiahao glanced at her grandfather and realized that the peace was already with him. She believed it was already over and that a quick escape was the best option. However, her grandfather noticed her presence and shouted, commanding her to stop hiding and come inside immediately. Yongkong admired his unique piece, which she had sold for 200 and later bought back for 9 million. He asked his granddaughter why she had taken the time to visit her old grandfather. She brought good news, and he emphasized that he had just acquired something truly exceptional. Xiao Xiao grew increasingly frightened, fearing that she had not arrived in time and that her grandfather had ended up purchasing the item. This would be incredibly unfortunate. Yang Kong noticed something was off and asked what was going on, but the girl, feeling frightened, insisted that it was nothing. The old man recognized that expression all too well. He recalled that the last time she had acted that way was when she sold his precious porcelain for just 10 yuan. She grew even stranger as the old man examined the item he had just purchased. He looked at her, surprised, and started piecing together the facts, noting that she had been at his house the night before. Xiao ran away, calling out to her grandfather that she felt unwell and needed to go to the hospital immediately. However, the old man stood up in anger, commanding her to stop. As she ran, she called out to her grandmother for help, feeling that her grandfather was being too mean. Yong Kang was nearly catching up to her, urging her to think carefully about what she had just done. But before he could respond, her grandmother shouted at him through the phone, demanding to know why he was yelling at her precious granddaughter. She pointed out that at nearly 80 years old, he should have more patience, especially when dealing with a child. Xiao Xiao seized the opportunity to escape, wondering who had acted so swiftly to prevent her from buying it back before her grandfather discovered the truth. She paused, reflecting on the fact that she had just left the pavilion, and the only person who had departed was the man who had predicted her fall, which suggested he had remarkably good eyesight. Somewhere else, the protagonist sensed that someone was talking about him. He wondered if the greasy seller, who had been acting strangely, had decided to try to frame him. The probability emerged, stating that the attempt to frame him was guaranteed. However, Baiwu was not overly concerned about it. He asked the golden finger if he would be framed, if someone would send someone to deal with him, or if that seller would continue collecting junk in an attempt to deceive him. His ability indicated that the probability of the seller continuing to try to deceive him was high. The protagonist felt a surge of happiness, knowing that with his success rate, he was essentially invincible. Finding treasure relied entirely on luck, and even with his powers, there might not be any treasure on Antique Street. If it hadn't been for Xiaoho's carelessness, he wouldn't have earned several million. He also believed that mistakenly selling an antique for just $200 was a very bold move, highlighting how difficult it was to understand the world of the wealthy. However, he soon realized that something about this situation didn't seem right. The girls he had met recently were all quite unusual. For safety's sake, he believed it would be wiser not to get involved with Xiao Xiao. He also had to think about what to do if he couldn't find any treasure. While contemplating all of this, he had a bold idea. He asked the Golden Finger if it would be possible to find a treasure in the antique market the following day. The probability was absolute, standing at 100%. The protagonist felt a surge of happiness, believing this was exactly as he had anticipated. He could even predict in advance whether he would discover something or not. Earning tens of millions a day had shifted from a dream to a reality. He glanced at the car parked beside him, realizing he couldn't resist showing off when luck was on his side. After all, a real man should drive a good car, and that bus stop should lead him to the automobile market. Upon arriving at the bus stop, he noticed that Xiao Xiao was also present, which he found a bit suspicious. Suddenly, he received a notification on his phone. The girl was wondering what she should give her grandfather as an apology, as she felt too afraid to go home with him while he was still angry. Baiwu believed that the girl was somewhat foolish. He noticed a strange man standing beside her. He asked the Golden Finger if it was possible that he was a thief. The probability stood at 50%. The man started to move closer and closer. The protagonist received confirmation that the bus pervert had appeared with a probability of 100%. He sent her a message warning that the man in the black overcoat beside her did not seem like a good person and advised her to be careful. Both she and the thug were taken by surprise. She glanced to the side, wondering why the protagonist was present and constantly saying something despicable. She responded, noting that it was him again and expressing that this was very unfortunate. The protagonist grew irritated, expressing that once again, his good deeds had been misinterpreted as bad intentions. He insulted the girl, calling her ungrateful and emphasizing that he did not care about the consequences. Suddenly, the bus arrived, announcing the northern route of the city, and the passengers boarding first needed to make their way toward the back. The man behind Xiao gently touched her shoulder. She appeared slightly irritated, prompting the man to retract his hand while laughing. He then apologized, explaining that he had lost his balance due to the crowd. Xiao chose to ignore the situation and returned to using her phone. The protagonist surveyed the situation and realized that the girl truly did not understand anything. As the man prepared to grab her again, Bai Wu recognized the situation and knew he had to act. He understood that the girl was strong and deserving of respect, and he couldn't simply stand by while a woman was being touched against her will. He walked toward the man and shouted at him, but before he could act, Xiao struck the pervert. Then, she grabbed him by the arm and kicked him in his most sensitive area. Bai Wu was frightened by what he saw, but she continued to beat the man. He threw him hard onto the ground in front of everyone. The others looked on, somewhat confused and unsure of what was happening. Xiao shouted, feeling a bit embarrassed that the man had been deliberately trying to touch her. Bai Wu was startled, realizing that the girl's physique was proportional to her agility, suggesting she might be some kind of mixed martial artist. Xiao was genuinely intrigued by how that unfortunate individual had managed to predict that she would be attacked again. He appeared to be more accurate than she was when it came to judging people and situations, which she found rather odd. Bai Wu, terrified by her strength, believed this was the end for him. If she discovered that he had purchased the Tang Sankai, he would likely be dead by now. He stated that he needed to get rid of that girl quickly. It was only 2 stops to the automobile market, which should take just a few minutes. However, the Golden Finger stated that the probability of that happening was 0%. The protagonist was taken aback, wondering what was happening and why the bus was taking so long to reach his destination. It felt incredibly unfortunate. As he boarded the bus, he glanced at her, feeling particularly unlucky that day, and wondered if there might be a traffic jam or an accident ahead. However, the probability for both was recorded as 0%. He had a bad feeling about what was going to happen. They wondered if it could be the work of a criminal, as the situation was too bizarre to ignore. The Golden Finger stated that the probability of a criminal kidnapping was 0%. Similarly, the likelihood of a criminal taking a hostage was also 0%. However, the probability of a criminal starting a fire was 100%. The probability of the criminal already being on the bus was also 100%. The protagonist grew desperate, pleading for guidance as the criminal was already inside the bus. He realized that any rash action could make the criminal even more cautious. The criminal succeeded. If everyone inside the bus was finished, there would be no hope. However, if he attempted to stop the arson, the chances of success would likely be 0, even without any calculations. Given the urgency of the situation, he decided to call the police right away. He called the police dispatch center to report a crime, stating that a criminal intended to set a bus on fire. The police requested that he provide the exact location. Bai Wu provided the bus number, noting that it had just arrived at the antique market stop, with the next stop being the automobile trade city. He emphasized that there were passengers on the bus and the criminal was among them. The dispatcher confirmed that they understood the situation fully and were initiating an emergency response. He urged the police to hurry, as the criminal was carrying 8 to 9 liters of gasoline, and setting fire to the bus could result in casualties. However, the dispatcher began to question how the protagonist had discovered this information and whether he had any proof. Bai Wu felt that it was completely over for him, as he had been too focused on calculating the success rate. The dispatcher continued to question him, asking if he was certain about his claims. He inquired how he knew there was a criminal planning to set fire to the bus, how he confirmed that the person was carrying 8 to 9 liters of gasoline, and how he was aware that the criminal intended to ignite the fire between those 2 stops. Bai Wu grew desperate, convinced he had no proof to support his claims. He even considered claiming he had superpowers, but quickly realized that no one would believe him. Even then, he watched as the bus closed its doors and began to move. Hanging up the phone, he felt it was too late. Although the police had been notified, he still needed to track down the criminal. but right behind him, Zhao Xiao boarded the bus and asked why she was there, suspecting that she might be trying to cause trouble for him, as this was a matter of life and death. Zhao Xiao simply smiled. The protagonist realized this was a troubling situation. If that girl became obsessed with him again, it would lead to significant problems. Therefore, he needed to find the criminal quickly. He received a call from the police department. As soon as he answered, the officer informed him that they had contacted an off-duty police officer on the bus who would closely monitor both him and the situation. However, if the protagonist confirmed that a criminal was present, he was advised to act normally for his own safety. Bai Wu felt a sense of relief upon learning that a police officer was present. He glanced back and noticed Zhao Xiao staring at him. He looked ahead and realized that the police officer had no idea who the criminal was, so how could he possibly subdue him? Because of this, he needed to come up with a plan to resolve the situation. The criminal was likely sitting down. The golden finger indicated that the probability of the criminal being seated was 100%. However, the probability of him being seated in the front half of the bus was 0%. The probability of him being seated in the back was certain. Bai Wu began walking toward the back of the bus, but the girl continued to follow him. Bai Wu questioned why she was following him as he searched for a criminal carrying approximately 9 liters of gasoline, realizing this was no joke. As he looked at the passengers and noticed something strange, he thought it would be difficult to bring that much gasoline onto the bus. The criminal had likely divided it into drink bottles or something similar, which meant he should be carrying a bag. The man standing right in front of him was behaving oddly, clutching a bag tightly. Bai Wu suspected it was that man, as he was gripping the bag tightly. However, before he could approach any closer, the man started to open the bag. The protagonist realized he may have acted too hastily, sensing that something was about to happen. But either way, it was too late now. Bai Wu remained there anxiously, contemplating how to lessen the man's suspicion, or whether it would be more effective to launch a quick attack to subdue him. Zhao Xiao grabbed the protagonist's shoulder and urged him to stay hidden. Bai Wu glanced back, realizing he felt regret this time, but he suspected the officer was watching him intently. The golden finger stated that the probability of that happening was 100%. He turned to her and called her grandma, admitting that he had been wrong. He truly did not believe she was a flat-chested brute. He told her not to follow him anymore, insisting he was an innocent young man. He believed the situation was urgent and needed her help to distract the criminal, allowing him to find an opportunity to act. This way, he could also alert the police officer, achieving 2 goals at once. The criminal became distracted by the argument. The protagonist saw this as a valuable opportunity. Zhao Xiao prepared to throw a punch and asked why the protagonist had stopped running. He pretended he would dodge the blow, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. He grabbed the criminal's bag, causing it to spill open. The criminal stood up angrily and demanded to know what he was doing. Bai Wu noticed that the man was genuinely cautious, suggesting he might have undergone training. But suddenly, Zhao Xiao delivered a powerful punch to the man's face. The protagonist was taken aback. As she continued to beat him, quickly subdued him in front of everyone. Bai Wu asked if she was a superhero, but Zhao Xiao removed her handcuffs. He stated that it was police business, and now the criminal was under arrest. She picked up a bottle. He smelled it and confirmed that it was indeed gasoline. Bai Wu could hardly believe that she was truly an officer of the law. Once outside the bus, Zhao Xiao announced that everything was taken care of. And gazed at the protagonist. She threatened to report that he was the one who called it in, leaving him to explain how he knew. The protagonist found her to be quite troublesome, as she relentlessly pursued him. He believed it was better to avoid problems than to create them, so he needed to devise a way to escape this situation. He looked at her and said she should keep this a secret because, in truth, he was a humble person with the ability to predict the future. If she didn't believe him, she only needed to reflect on the events that had occurred in the past. Zhao Xiao believed that, in reality, that guy was a bit unlucky. The protagonist was taken aback by her reaction. He believed he was in serious trouble because he couldn't afford to speak carelessly or eat improperly. Now, he could no longer escape this situation and needed to come up with a solution quickly. Zhao Xiao grew irritated and punched the wall, exclaiming that he was still pretending to be foolish. He questioned again how he knew. The protagonist grew frightened and asked what she wanted to know. Zhao Xiao reported that a vigilant citizen happened to pass by and discovered a criminal who was attempting to set a bus on fire. Bai Wu lowered her hand and said there was no need to thank him, as it was his duty as a helpful citizen. But she continued, irritated, saying that from the looks of it, he would not cry until he saw the coffin. She pressed him against the wall, insisting that she clearly remembered he had not entered the bus when he called the police. Furthermore, he did not know the criminal, but he was aware that the man was carrying 8 to 9 liters of gasoline. The people around them grew curious, observing the situation unfold. The protagonist continued to downplay his insights, insisting that he had merely made a guess. However, Zhao Xiao remained unconvinced and questioned how he could have guessed with such detail. It seemed clear that a more private conversation over tea was in order. Everyone was looking directly at him, and the protagonist thought that this girl was very smart, which could spell trouble. Suddenly, Yer appeared among the crowd and asked the protagonist what was happening. He was surprised and asked why she was there. The policewoman was taken aback and asked if she knew the protagonist. Yer explained that her car had broken down and that she was on her way to the repair shop. She moved a little closer and asked the protagonist once more what was happening to him. Bai Wu believed he understood that this woman was typically very mature and cold. However, in this moment, her tone resembled that of someone who had just caught another person cheating. Suddenly, he recognized a significant opportunity in that situation. He winked at her, and she was slightly taken aback. He rushed over to her, took her hand, and exclaimed that it wasn't what she was thinking. He knelt in front of her and said that he had nothing to do with that woman. Everyone around them was surprised by that attitude, and Bai Wu shouted, pointing at Zhao Xiao, accusing her of being the one who wouldn't leave him alone. He told Zhao Xiao that they barely knew each other. He also expressed his deep love for his girlfriend and requested that she stop bothering him. Zhao Xiao felt embarrassed, stating that this was not exactly what was happening. The people around them wondered if they were witnessing a real cheating scandal unfold before their eyes, and the excitement was palpable. It appeared that a man had brought his lover to buy a car, only to be caught red-handed by his wife. Judging by the wife's expression, she was clearly furious. Zhao Xiao grew irritated and asked the protagonist who was really bothering whom. Bai Wu held Ye's arm and insisted that she had seen it with her own eyes. This woman was the one preventing him from leaving. Yi realized the gravity of the situation. He played along, claiming to be her boyfriend and asking Zhao Xiao to stop bothering him. Everyone was filled with excitement. Zhao Xiao felt both embarrassed and furious about the situation. The protagonist believed he had reached a point of no return, and now he could no longer back down. Zhao Xiao looked at Bai Wu and lost control. He punched him. As he knelt in pain on the ground, Zhao Xiao turned and walked away. She passed by Yi, stating that she was not interested in that boy, but advised her to be cautious, as her boyfriend might not be a good person. Yi asked about Bai Wu's well-being. He stood up and thanked her, acknowledging that although he had paid a high price, he had finally managed to resolve the problem for now, and she had been a tremendous help in achieving that. Yer smiled and replied that the protagonist had helped her before, considering this his apology for involving her in the mess last time. Among all those present, Qing King was watching as well. The protagonist and Yer continued their conversation, sharing smiles. She became so jealous that she declared if the protagonist bothered her girl again, she would not let him escape this time. The next day, Bai Wu reflected on how love affairs could weaken heroes. He realized that if he continued to get involved with young women, he would be unable to focus on anything else. In the future, he should avoid them to minimize problems and concentrate on making his money. After all, in life, everything else is just an illusion. Only money is real. He returned to Antique Street, but the familiar sights and sounds felt different this time. Qing Ting was following him. He happily recalled that yesterday he had calculated he would find a treasure today, and this rhythm felt familiar. He went to the usual stall, but upon arrival, he was surprised to find that Wang was not there. The seller, who always stayed by his side, confirmed this was indeed the case. They had mentioned going to the countryside to search for treasures, but Wang had already been absent for several days. He asked the golden finger if the treasure he would find that day would not come from Wang, and the golden finger claimed it was 100%. He emphasized that this was unimportant, and asked the other seller where he could find Wang. However, the golden finger displayed 0%, surprising the protagonist and making him wonder what it meant. He questioned whether this indicated he would not be able to find a treasure that day, and the system confirmed that was indeed the case. However, the protagonist felt a bit lost, as this situation differed greatly from what they had agreed upon the previous day. This likely indicated that there was a treasure, but he would not be able to find it. Bai Wu decided to put his concerns on hold for the moment, prioritizing the search for Wang before tackling anything else. Meanwhile, Qing Ting stayed focused, watching every move the protagonist made. 30 minutes later, Bai Wu approached another stall and found an item that was completely authentic. He asked the seller for the price of that object. The merchant stated that the price was $3,000, but if the protagonist was truly interested, he could offer a 5% discount. However, Bai Wu was not satisfied and suggested that a 50% discount would be more appropriate. The seller smiled and agreed to the 50% discount. Bai Wu believed that once again, the owner was unaware of the true value of that item. He found it strange that he had just discovered a treasure, yet his ability still indicated failure. Qingting arrived and offered to buy it for the original price of $3,000. Bai Wu saw this as a remarkable coincidence. The seller quickly presented the offer to the girl. Bai Wu advised the seller not to rush, emphasizing the importance of proceeding in order, and offered $10,000. In response, Qingting raised her offer to $30,000. Bai Wu realized that the stall owner was being deliberate in his reluctance to sell the bronze furnace, which he believed to be highly valuable. With a laugh, Bai Wu pointed out that he was offering $50,000, adding that if she made a higher bid, that piece of trash would be hers. Qingting then interjected, stating that she offered $100,000, and asked for the protagonist's thoughts on her bid. Bai Wu realized he could not deceive the girl and would likely need to keep raising the price. Qingting believed that if he wanted to continue playing, it didn't matter to her. Even if she had simply purchased that worthless item, it would make no difference to her. The protagonist stated that it was fine and emphasized her victory. As he left, he realized that she had placed a bid without clearly examining the object, indicating that her true target was him, not the item itself. He knew it would be foolish to continue bidding and confront her directly. The system indicated that continuing to bid was futile and suggested checking the success rate. Frustrated, he snapped at the system to be quiet. As soon as Qingting picked up the piece, she realized it truly resembled an authentic piece from the Ming dynasty. From the looks of it, Bai Wu was indeed quite strange. She continued to follow him. The protagonist asked if she had finished shopping, but she ignored him, stating that this street did not belong to him. He approached another stall and discovered an item priced at $100,000. However, she countered by offering $200,000 to cover the cost. This occurred multiple times. After a while, he became so irritated that he asked if she was there solely to target him. She simply smiled and replied that perhaps it was because she trusted the protagonist's judgment. It was clear that he could intentionally raise the prices, or even select only counterfeit products. However, she had plenty of money and was unconcerned about it. She approached, saying he was the boy who had just turned 20 and was from Tongjiang. She came from an ordinary family and was currently on leave. Despite having purchased a top-of-the-line vehicle just yesterday, she questioned whether his newfound wealth was a bit too sudden. Bai Wu asked if she was truly investigating him and emphasized that he was merely an ordinary boy trying his luck and discovering a few treasures. This was legal income, and he had committed no crime. Qingting mentioned that everything was fine. Previously, he had claimed he could predict the future and believed he could find a treasure on his own, which was truly remarkable. According to her investigation, he had been quite ordinary for the first 20 years and had no family inheritance in that field. She emphasized that she did not know what tricks he had used and questioned whether he truly believed he could reach the peak of life simply by wishing for it, calling that a pathetic waste. She emphasized that it didn't matter how he had achieved it. She could promise one thing. From that day on, she had cut off his path to wealth. He should not even consider escaping mediocrity from that point on. Bai Wu was taken aback, questioning whether it was truly a crime to desire to stand out. She then asserted that she understood what needed to be done. She continued to believe she was in control and asked him to say something, questioning whether he was scared since he had fallen silent after she threatened to cut off his wealth. The protagonist, on the verge of losing control, called out to her, accusing her of deliberately raising prices to prevent him from making money. He expressed that he had been generous by refraining from arguing with her. Now, she was declaring that she would block his path to wealth. She asked him if he truly did not believe she could accomplish that. The protagonist stressed that it was impossible for her to do something like that. She walked away, but continued to follow him, insisting that, by the looks of it, he didn't believe her. She vowed to ensure he wouldn't earn a single cent. Bai Wu carefully observed the things around him. She believed that as long as he purchased something, she would raise her bid to acquire it, so she was eager to see what he could do. Bai Wu gazed at a seller, began to greet him, approached him, and whispered into his ear. She assumed he was getting ready to make a purchase, and now it was time for her to demonstrate how to block his path to wealth. However, Baiwu simply left without making a purchase, leaving her a bit confused by the situation. He repeated this action time and time again. Ting felt lost, wondering what he was doing as he spoke to all the sellers without making any purchases. He asked the Golden Finger about the success rate of his plan, and the answer was 100%. He let out a hearty laugh. He declared that it was now his time to act. He gathered everyone and informed the bosses that he wanted to purchase everything in their shops. Ting believed he was searching for treasure among the shops, and to avoid any complications, he had intentionally used quantity to obscure his true intentions for what he wanted to purchase. She asked the protagonist if he truly believed this could stop her, adding that if he did, he was nothing more than a fool. Baiwu simply smiled, stating that if the bosses had no objections, they could proceed with completing the transaction now. She stepped in, asking them to wait, and expressed that she wanted everything from all the shops as well. The protagonist urged her not to exaggerate. She emphasized that for anything he tried to buy, she would offer a higher price, effectively sealing his path to wealth. The protagonist emphasized that he was aware of her considerable wealth. However, all the sellers had an extensive amount of stock. She questioned whether she could truly buy everything or if she was just bluffing to intimidate him. Ting grew increasingly irritated. She confronted him, asking if he was genuinely trying to look down on her and questioning what right he had to do so. She only asked them to state the total price of everything in the shop because she would. Everyone watched as the events unfolded. She prepared to make the payment, insisting that everyone would profit, so they needed to act quickly. A short while later, she sent the checks to everyone. One of the sellers asked her to provide an address so they could deliver everything. Ting instructed them to leave an address or a card, as she would have her butler collect the items. After making the purchase, she turned to the protagonist, wondering where all the arrogance he had displayed earlier had gone. It seemed she truly had the power to block his path to wealth whenever she chose. However, Baiwu continued to laugh as he walked past her. He approached the sellers, and they all agreed that he was an excellent salesman. As previously arranged, the money was split 50% for each side, and the transfer would occur immediately. He hugged the sellers, who continued to say that they had already transferred the money. They added that if he had any more good news in the future, he could come to them again. Ting was filled with fury. When she saw Baiwu displaying all the transfers, I went over to the sellers and asked if they had been collaborating. The protagonist agreed, stating that was exactly right, as he had been wandering around the antique market earlier, searching for sellers interested in collaborating. To simplify the entire plan, she acted impulsively and was easily angered, making the payment as soon as he provoked her. Now, just as he had stated before, his path to wealth could not be hindered by someone of low intelligence. Ting became furious and remarked that it was a clever move, but he better remember it. The protagonist continued to laugh, and I wished her a nice trip and reminded her not to let the door hit her on the way out. Suddenly, he noticed something unfolding. A system screen appeared before him, indicating that the system update was in progress. He felt a surge of surprise, pondering what changes this might bring. Suddenly, the update finished, and the system prompted him to use his imagination to create the most creative and surprising line. As he left, he reflected on the fact that, although he had profited from that girl as she had claimed, her family was large and powerful, and he knew he couldn't compete with that. He had expected the system to evolve into something remarkable, but it hadn't, and he needed to utilize it to gain a better understanding of the differences at play. Additionally, his strength was insufficient at that moment. He lacked the connections and financial resources to generate significant income, so he needed to expand his network further. However, he still did not know how to accomplish that. As he approached the car, he noticed a man standing beside it. The man asked if he was Baiwu and introduced himself as Miss Ching's butler. The protagonist wondered if he was there to seek revenge for her defeat, suspecting that he might secretly be a master fighter or a retired special forces soldier. However, the butler clarified that was not entirely accurate, as his lady wished to invite him to a gathering of influential people to apologize for the misunderstanding. Baiwu felt a twinge of suspicion, believing that she might have ulterior motives. However, he could use this opportunity to meet influential people and expand his network in the future. He told the butler there was no problem, as he was willing to go. A few hours later, he arrived at the designated location. She waited at the door, expressing her belief that he would not show up. The protagonist emphasized that even though it was a hostile banquet, Liu Bang had walked away unharmed, so what was there to fear? Ting asked him to follow her, as she wanted to introduce him to some people. She introduced him to 3 individuals, pointing out that the blonde one was the future successor of the Xinghai Group, young Master Wang. The person in the middle was Mr. Zhou, the head of Xinquang Technology. And finally, there was Madame Lu, the CEO of Yifu Media. She was confident that he had heard of them before. Bai Wu was surprised, believing that all of them were genuinely influential individuals. In truth, he felt a bit nervous in their presence. This must be what they referred to as self-aware inferiority. She smiled, recognizing this behavior as typical of an uncultured nouveau riche, particularly his discomfort around influential people. Now, she would witness firsthand how else he could be humiliated. The protagonist realized that her true intention was to make him play the fool. However, the more he tried not to be nervous, the more anxious he became. If this continued, he would surely embarrass himself. Suddenly, he finally understood the situation and realized that he did not care about influential people. Since they all ate, drank, and needed to use the bathroom, he just had to picture them doing so. This way, he wouldn't feel as nervous. Bai Wu smiled and greeted them, expressing his pleasure in meeting them and introducing himself by name. Ching Ting was surprised, wondering how he had suddenly become so calm. 5 minutes later, they approached a table, and she praised him for doing very well. What surprised her most was how calmly he managed to converse with influential people. The protagonist emphasized that influential people are just like ordinary individuals. Ching Ting emphasized that the differences between classes were not visible to the naked eye alone. Suddenly, a person stepped onto the stage. The host informed all the guests that they would now proceed to the main theme of the gathering in the hall, which was the charity auction. The protagonist was taken aback by this. Ching Ting smiled, called him a country bumpkin, and asked if he really needed her to explain it. The protagonist replied with a popular saying, stating that he didn't need an explanation. Although he had never eaten pork, he had seen pigs running, so he understood very well what a charity auction meant. Ching Ting looked at him and remarked that this was truly impressive. She revealed a box containing a porcelain bowl from the Ming Dynasty and expressed her desire to auction it at the event. She placed the box on the table and mentioned that he was an antique expert, so he could help her appraise it for the auction. Bai Wu asked if she truly wanted him to do that and questioned what benefit it would bring him. Ching Ting emphasized that she was doing this solely for charity, and if he wished, the auction could be held in his name. She asked if he hadn't mentioned wanting to make a lot of money, because if he truly intended to do that, building a good reputation with influential people would be very beneficial for him in the future. Bai Wu believed this made perfect sense. Everyone present was influential, and ensuring they remembered him would significantly aid in expanding his network in the future. However, he remained suspicious, feeling that something was off, and questioned why she would intentionally want to help him. Ching Ting stated that it was very simple. It was better to resolve enmity than to let it fester, and she did not want things to become too awkward between them. The protagonist stayed on high alert, convinced he couldn't trust her, as he suspected she was likely plotting some scheme. He questioned whether his ability was real. His ability confirmed that the authenticity was 100%, with one additional condition. Furthermore, the recent transaction price was $12,500,000. Recognizing that the antique was indeed genuine, he inquired whether the auction could end in failure. However, the chance of success was guaranteed at 100%. He believed both the antique and the auction would be successful, leaving him with nothing to worry about. From the looks of it, he had been overthinking before taking any action. Even if she had a plan, he had the system on his side, so there was no reason to be afraid. Ching Ting prepared to take the box back and asked if he agreed, noting that if he didn't want to, it was perfectly fine. The protagonist held the box. He expressed his agreement and his love for performing good deeds. The announcer announced that the next item would be the final one in the charity auction. Bai Wu gazed at Ching Ting, who wore a somewhat unusual expression on her face. This led him to suspect that there was likely something unusual behind it all. The auctioneer announced that this item was being provided by Mr. Bai Wu. The protagonist realized he had already come too far, and that overthinking at this point was pointless. The antique was genuine, and the auction boasted a 100% success rate, so he was eager to see what tricks she could pull. He set the box down on the table. He introduced himself to everyone, expressing that it was a pleasure to meet them. However, as soon as he lifted the lid of the box, it revealed a roll of toilet paper. This left him surprised. People started mocking the situation, questioning whether the organizers had arranged that to liven up the atmosphere. The protagonist realized he had suspected it wouldn't be that simple. This was what she had been planning all along. He tried to recall when she had swapped it, because the antique had been tested and confirmed to be 100% authentic. He recalled that she had mentioned her earring had fallen and asked him to pick it up. As soon as he bent down, that was likely when she switched the boxes. I believe this was a very profound strategy. She was laughing as she watched the situation unfold. The auctioneer mocked him, asking if the protagonist had been in a hurry to use the bathroom and had actually gone up on stage with toilet paper. Ching Ting was savoring the moment, believing that this time she had successfully made him look like a fool. However, the protagonist realized he could not let this situation slip away easily. If he ran away now, it would mean succumbing entirely to her plan. Therefore, he needed to find a way to turn things around. If everything fell apart, rumors would spread, jeopardizing his career. Some audience members laughed, suggesting that if he didn't have a presentation, he should leave the stage, as they felt he was just standing there looking foolish. Another person urged the host to remove the protagonist, insisting that they needed to move on. The auctioneer suggested that perhaps Baiwu should step down and wipe off some sweat. The protagonist grew irritated, believing he could not simply admit defeat like that. He would go all in, placing desperate bets on what needed to be done. He focused intently, knowing that the auction's success rate had been 100%, which meant there had to be a way to resolve the issue. However, he believed that the success rate alone was not everything. In a situation like this, he had no choice but to rely on his improvisation. All those years spent writing novels had not been in vain, so he needed to harness his creativity. He held the toilet paper in his hand. In everyone's eyes, this might just be half a roll of toilet paper, but to him, it was the most precious gift. The crowd fell silent and started to pay attention. Ching drew anxious, wondering what kind of trick that guy was trying to pull this time. The protagonist acknowledged that despite appearing strong and powerful at that moment, in truth, he had been quite sensitive when he was younger, enduring bullying and threats from other children. He always returned home in tears. His mother tried to cheer him up since it was his birthday, and they were enjoying longevity noodles together. Due to his family's financial struggles, his father gifted him a roll of toilet paper for his birthday. The protagonist emphasized that he was very young and unable to understand, so he asked his father why he was giving him toilet paper as a gift. His father, with great experience, touched his head and said that he was a man, and men bleed but do not cry. Because of this, he wanted the protagonist to use that gift as motivation. Whenever he found himself unable to stop crying, he should use it to wipe away his tears, as his father had a deep belief in his potential. Made the protagonist see the world in a new light. He believed he could become someone in the future, possessing even half the manliness his father carried in his chest. He emphasized that shortly after that, his parents tragically passed away in an accident. His family was left in dire straits, and all he inherited was a mountain of debt and a single roll of toilet paper. He took a deep breath and recalled his father's words, reminding himself not to cry. However, the hardships of life could only be understood through experience. With tears in his eyes and his hand trembling, he raised his face and said that whenever he felt he could no longer continue, he would tear off a piece of that roll of toilet paper to wipe away his tears and remind himself that he had to be stronger. In this manner, gradually, he had reached that place and earned the right to be present at the auction. So that half roll of toilet paper symbolized his struggles and achievements, along with all his defeats and tears. At that crucial moment, he was willing to auction off something extremely precious to him, a roll of toilet paper to contribute to charity and help others secure their place in the world. The laughter faded, and silence enveloped the room. Cheng Ting was shocked and thought that, judging by his demeanor, the boy had no idea what kind of place this was to attempt something like that. However, everyone remained silent, leading her to believe that it had not made much of an impact. The protagonist continued to look around, convinced that there would be no bids or reactions at all. Suddenly, someone started applauding, commenting that the story was quite interesting. He liked the protagonist, so he decided to bid 100,000. Baiwu felt a sense of relief. The auctioneer declared it sold, signaling the conclusion of the event. The protagonist was impressed by the auctioneer's skills, as he adeptly seized the moment and brought everything to a close. Trembling with nerves, he reminded himself that as a novelist, he could always improvise a story to escape any situation. Otherwise, he would have faced complete humiliation. Ching Ting stood up to leave, and as she did, a sense of determination filled the room. The protagonist looked at her, questioning whether she truly expected him to feel humiliated, as he had successfully managed the situation. Ching Ting remained irritated, insisting that he had only been lucky this time, but next time, he might not be so fortunate. She left and he let out a sigh of relief. He realized that although he had saved his reputation, his plan to meet influential people had been completely ruined. He walked to the parking lot, realizing that despite having navigated the situation by inventing a story, he would only be seen as a clown in their eyes. He had to admit that the one who emerged victorious this time was Ching Ting. Without her, no one would pay attention to him. Now, he had to work hard to earn money, for with money came status and dignity. Suddenly, a luxury car drove past him. Baiwu was taken aback. He was left wondering why the big shot who had bought his toilet paper had suddenly disappeared. When asked why they were together, the system indicated that she had a business partnership with the other party, and that the two families were on the verge of uniting through marriage. Baiwu was surprised, pondering why there was suddenly more intelligence within the system. Perhaps this change was a result of the recent update. Now that he was aware of the marriage, he finally understood why Qing Ting had been acting that way. The world of the wealthy was undeniably complex, so he decided it was best to refrain from getting involved. The priority was to concentrate on making money. Additionally, he should seek out some helpers within the antique circle, as this was the area he was most familiar with. He remembered Wang and realized that, in truth, he missed him a little. He wondered if it was possible that he had discovered another treasure recently. The system indicated that Wang Pengzi might have another treasure to collect. From now on, he would refer to the seller as Pengzi. The protagonist smiled, realizing how incredible this guy was for always finding treasures. Yet, it was the protagonist who became rich. Perhaps forming a partnership with him would be even more beneficial. He had connections in the antique circle and was quite eloquent, allowing him to take the lead in situations where it would be inconvenient for Baiwu to step forward. With Pengzi's help, his future in the antique world would become significantly easier. As a result, he needed to take this action. The next day at his stall, Pengzi received a phone call inquiring why he had not arrived yet. But suddenly, they received the news that they had been waiting for him for quite some time. The protagonist then approached. Pengzi became irritated and asked what business he had there, calling him unlucky since he had nothing left to sell. Baiwu urged him to calm down, explaining that he was there to discuss a partnership. Pengzi questioned the nature of this partnership. Baiwu explained that the merchant's luck was immense, and he always stumbled upon valuable finds. He noted that his keen eye could consistently identify true treasures, suggesting that if they formed a partnership, it would be a winning combination. Baiwu explained that if they formed a partnership, they could split the profits evenly, 50-50, and asked the merchant for his thoughts on the proposal. Pengzi, irritated, stated that the protagonist had defeated him twice, meaning he had consumed the meat and drunk the soup, leaving him with barely enough to lick from the bowl. How could he have the audacity to come there and discuss a partnership? Pengzi emphasized that the protagonist was likely there only to mock him and asked him to leave, as he no longer wanted to engage in that conversation. Baiwu recognized that he still harbored a grudge from the last two incidents and felt a lingering anger. If the protagonist continued to insist on that matter, things could spiral out of control. Baiwu believed his goal wasn't to provoke a confrontation, so he decided it was best to step back for the moment. Regardless, there would be future opportunities to confront him, and sooner or later, he would be completely under his control. As Baiwu was departing, two other people approached Pengzi and began discussing a topic. The conversation quickly grew animated as they exchanged ideas and opinions. The protagonist noticed this and began to think that perhaps Pengzi was in serious trouble. Pengzi expressed his interest in seeing what they had for sale. The old man appeared suspicious. He displayed the sword, while the other seller insisted that he had personally examined it and confirmed it was indeed Cao Cao's 7-star sword. Pengzi began analyzing the sword, but he quickly realized that its intricate design held secrets he had not anticipated. The protagonist continued to observe, believing that this story was rather exaggerated. However, he noticed that the merchant was examining him closely and questioned whether his sword was real. However, the system warned that it was entirely fake. Pengzi completed the analysis and confirmed that the item was indeed genuine, prompting them to state their price. Baiwu believed the merchant was truly a complete fool for wanting to purchase a fake. Or perhaps the sword was so expertly crafted that even the merchant failed to notice its true nature. He inquired about the likelihood of Pengzi seeing through the deception. The system indicated that it was at 0%. The protagonist recognized that Pengzi was highly experienced, and if he could be deceived, it indicated that the forgery skills were exceptional. However, it was unfortunate that they could not fool his keen perception. However, he was unaware of what was wrong with the sword because he could not see it. Suddenly, the system changed once more, revealing details that had not been displayed before. As a result, he analyzed every detail but dismissed the jewel and the gemstone, knowing that Pengzi was very experienced. If it were something that simple, he would have definitely noticed it immediately. The flaw was likely located beneath the gemstone. Baiwu believed that by helping him now, he could avoid owing a favor in return. However, it was time to reveal the true methods he employed. Given his intelligence, those two petty thieves should not even consider scheming against him. Baiwu approached the three of them. Pengzi became somewhat irritated. Bai Wu assured him it was fine and encouraged him to stop hiding the sword. He then inquired whether that SSR level 7-star sword was truly at max level, since every new player received one. Pengzi asked him what he meant by that. Bai Wu stated that it was precisely what it sounded like. Pengzi grew irritated and asserted that he had personally examined the sword, noting its shape, condition, patina, and any damage, all of which he found to be completely flawless. Having been part of the antique circle for over a decade, he questioned how the protagonist could think he wouldn't be able to distinguish between something fake and something genuine. Pengzi believed this was merely a scheme by the protagonist to steal his sword, and wondered if there was some underlying grudge that prompted such actions. Bai Wu wondered what would happen if he could prove the sword was fake. If he succeeded, perhaps Pengzi would choose to follow him from that point onward. Pengzi questioned what would occur if the sword were real, as he did not want the protagonist to succeed. Bai Wu inquired about the price of the sword from the seller. Pengzi grew increasingly irritated, believing that the protagonist was inquiring about the price with the intent to steal the sale. The seller responded that the item was priced at $500,000. Bai Wu emphasized that if he was wrong, he would pay 10 times more, bringing the total price to $5 million. Pengzi immediately accepted and handed the sword to the protagonist, stating that since he had made a promise, he had to keep his word. He asked Master Bai to step forward in front of everyone and demonstrate how the sword could be fake, opening everyone's eyes to the truth. Bai Wu held the sword and instructed everyone to watch closely. As he was about to give them a brief lesson, he picked up a bottle from the ground. Pengzi questioned what he intended to achieve with that. The protagonist is the central character in a story, often facing challenges and conflicts that drive the narrative forward. Their journey typically involves personal growth, moral dilemmas, and the pursuit of goals, making them relatable and engaging to the audience. Through their experiences, we explore themes of resilience, identity, and the human condition, ultimately connecting with the protagonist's triumphs and struggles. Struck the sword with great force and knocked a stone to the ground, leaving everyone behind surprised. Pengzi became irritated and asked if the protagonist had lost their mind. Bai Wu analyzed the origin of the gemstone's fall. He began laughing, wondering if that foolish man would still dare to refuse him now. He revealed the sword. They asked if QR codes existed during the Three Kingdoms period. Pengzi was in disbelief. The protagonist asked if he was now willing to follow him, as he was the true expert when it came to antique. Pengzi became increasingly irritated by the situation, as those two had genuinely been trying to deceive him. He asked if they were tired of living, but as soon as he glanced to the side, he realized they were gone. He kept shouting that they were lucky to have escaped, and if he found them again, they would have to pay. Pengzi looked at the protagonist and asked how he knew the sword was fake. He questioned whether it was possible that he had hired those two. Bai Wu questioned whether he was truly hearing what he had just asked. If he could acquire items of that quality, then why would he have sought out Pengzi to form a partnership? He discovered it when he heard a wise man say that everyone has their own methods, and those should remain private. Pengzi suggested that it might be best to forget the situation, as he truly did not want to revisit it. The protagonist stated that if he wasn't mistaken, there had been an agreement regarding the bet before he revealed that the sword was fake. Since he had won, the merchant would have to follow him. However, Pengzi refused, claiming that the protagonist was too cunning and that he couldn't see through everything, which made him a bit afraid of being deceived. He emphasized that the protagonist needed to find someone else for this partnership. Bai Wu explained that Pengzi was being somewhat unreasonable about the situation. Pengzi explained that he earned his living in the antique market and genuinely upheld his integrity, unlike the big shots in the industry who only told lies and lacked any sense of honor. The protagonist was impressed to discover the key figures in the industry. The merchant continued to refuse, suggesting it might be better to forget the entire partnership. However, he recalled all his debts and favors, realizing he couldn't allow the protagonist's help to go unacknowledged. He offered the protagonist a choice of anything from his stall as a token of gratitude for the help he had just provided. Bai Wu questioned what kind of junk this was. Pengzi became irritated, stating that he had personally collected all those treasures, and the protagonist was asked to take a look, as this was the kasaya worn by the venerable Xuanzang on his journey to the west. The protagonist wondered if he had stolen that costume from a theater troupe, as it still bore cigarette burn holes. Pengzi began to feel a bit worried about the situation. He decided to change items, presenting a large bowl that Wu Song had used to drink from before battling the leopard at Jingyang Ridge. The protagonist emphasized that it resembled a bowl from the ramen shop on the same street and wondered if he was truly capable of finding a reliable item. Pengzi realized that nothing was going as planned. He said he would reveal his most precious treasure and began searching through his belongings. The protagonist continued to look on, thinking that there was a lot of junk among the items and that the merchant was not doing very well. Upon reflection, he had indeed outsmarted Pingzi and amassed a fortune multiple times, so it was no surprise that he harbored such a deep grudge. A short while later, Pengzi finally discovered what he had been searching for. Bai Wu inquired about what it was this time and whether he had taken it from an elderly man exercising in the park. Pengzi declared that he would now open the protagonist's eyes. This was the twin feather sword, wielded by Liu Bei, also known as Liu Xuande, during the Three Kingdoms period. Suddenly, the system managed to verify the sword and indicated that the owner was being confirmed as Liu Bei. However, a message appeared stating that it could not confirm this. The protagonist was taken aback and asked if it was truly real. Pengzi agreed, but he could not give it to the protagonist, as he was relying on it to return to the market. Bai Wu believed that, judging by appearances, the fat man's treasure was that sword, and destiny truly was on his side. The protagonist had an idea, believing this was like a springboard that would allow him to genuinely meet that person. He needed to find a way to get his hands on the sword. Pengzi asked the protagonist if he had finished searching for what he wanted, suggesting that if he believed there were no treasures to be found, he would be in for a surprise. Bai Wu emphasized that first it was Cao Cao's 7-star sword, and now Liu Bei's twin feather sword. It seemed he was truly facing the Three Kingdoms now. Pengzi urged the protagonist to examine the shape, the condition, and the exquisite patina. Bai Wu interrupted him, stating that the merchant had previously made the same claim about the 7-star sword. Pengzi started to feel a bit worried. The protagonist moved a little closer, asking if he could guess that from the looks of it. This sword also had a code. Pengzi gazed at the 7-star sword lying on the ground, feeling a wave of disappointment wash over him. He examined the sword in his hand, noting that its characteristics were strikingly similar to those of the previous one, a testament to the skill of the forgers. Upset, he emphasized that he had believed he could collect the weapons of Liu Bei and Cao Cao and sell them for a fortune, but everything had gone awry. Irritated, he shook the sword in his hands, insisting that he had been deceived time and again, and by the looks of it, he would soon be struck by lightning as well. Bai Wu gripped the sword tightly. The protagonist noticed that the merchant now appeared quite pathetic, prompting him to offer assistance. He declared that he would keep the sword and asked the merchant to name his price, stating that he wouldn't bargain and would pay whatever amount was requested. Pengzi, feeling already downcast, remarked that he had told the protagonist they could choose anything, allowing him to take the sword and leave. Bai Wu expressed his gratitude for that. As he was leaving, he realized that Pengzi truly looked pathetic and deeply sad. So, he needed to find an opportunity to secure a good profit. Otherwise, the protagonist would feel somewhat uneasy about the entire situation. As a result, he wished he had met old Mr. Che back then. However, Mr. Che was a prominent figure in the antique world, and a gift that lacked significance would not have sufficed for him. At the center of the circle stood a pyramid. At the top were the enigmatic buyers, followed by the industry's major successes, where Mr. Yang Kong currently resided. Below them was the new force of the industry, where the protagonist had made his mark for the time being. Next came the veterans of the industry, including Pengzi. At the base were the industry's newcomers, often deceived or just starting out, who ended up purchasing goods at inflated prices. Bai Wu believed that with the twin feather sword in his possession, he could finally deliver it to old Che, as it truly was a treasure that had found its rightful owner. He made his way to the pavilion. Before entering, he realized he truly did not want to encounter that troublesome Zhao Xiao again. He entered the shop, where a woman was busy cleaning various items. I approached her and asked if old Chi was there. The girl smiled and apologized, explaining that her boss was currently busy and unable to receive visitors. The protagonist asked the system if Yang Kong would want to see him if he truly understood the situation, and the system responded with a yes. The protagonist asked the woman to inform Mr. Che that the person who sold the Tong Sung Kai previously was visiting him again. The door swung open, and a man stepped inside, his expression serious. The woman turned to him, her surprise evident, and quickly explained the situation. The man nodded, acknowledging her words, and then focused his attention on the protagonist, ready to address the matter at hand. Someone asked if he was truly the one who had sold the Tang Sankei to Grandpa. The protagonist was startled, realizing how truly pathetic it was to fear what was inevitably about to happen. Baiwu acted politely, addressing her as Miss, and remarked that they had finally met again. Zhao Xiao was already getting warmed up. The protagonist grew frightened and asked what was happening. She then looks at the protagonist and says that by combining old and new grudges, she is determined to teach him a valuable lesson. The system flashed red, signaling an emergency and indicating that there was a 100% chance of an injury preventing him from standing. Zhao Xiao attempted to punch him, but the protagonist managed to dodge and fled. She picked up a vase and asked where he was going as she prepared to throw it at him. But her grandfather suddenly appeared in front of her, filled with anger. She stopped at the last second. He shouted, demanding to know what nonsense she was up to now, and ordered her to put the vase down immediately. The old man emphasized that the situation was already getting out of control, ordering her to return home and reflect on her actions. Since she couldn't go against her grandfather, so she ended up obeying. He warned the protagonist to be patient and urged him not to let the two of them meet again outside, or else he might not be so fortunate. Baiwu watched her leave the pavilion, relieved that he had managed to avoid a disaster. However, he doubted she would simply depart obediently. She went outside, stating that she would not leave in that manner and would wait there. Yang Kong apologized on behalf of his granddaughter, explaining that the protagonist was being quite modest. He noted that she had been spoiled by her grandmother and was now somewhat ignorant. Baiwu smiled and remarked that she was a very direct and honest person, someone with a strong character, which was a valuable trait. However, the protagonist noticed that the expression on the old man's face revealed he had something on his mind. The system notified him that it could only analyze success rates and was unable to read minds. Baiwu observed that, from the looks of it, the system update had only enhanced its ability to complain. Yang Kong invited the protagonist to follow him, suggesting they could have a more peaceful conversation in the tea room on the upper floor of the pavilion. Once inside the room, the protagonist was impressed and remarked that the tea room was truly extraordinary. Yang Kong expressed his gratitude for the compliment, explaining that those were merely some random items he had placed there, as he couldn't bring himself to display them. Baiwu believed the old man was being quite modest, as the items in that room were clearly intended to be displayed. Yang Kong poured some tea and emphasized that the protagonist's visit likely indicated he had discovered another treasure. Baiwu displayed the sword and invited Yang Kong to examine it. He was taken aback. She smiled and remarked that it appeared to be a treasure from the Eastern Han Dynasty. The protagonist emphasized that ordinary items were unworthy of Yang Kong's discerning gaze, and only pieces of such quality were fitting for a victorious person like him. The old man emphasized that a pair of Eastern Han Dynasty swords in such condition would currently fetch around $5 million at auction. Baiwu inquired about the value of the sword if it were indeed the sword of Emperor Zhao Li. Yang Kong emphasized that if the item had been used by Duke Zhao Li in his early years, its price would be 10 times higher. Baiwu smiled and remarked that, as the saying goes, a good sword is meant for a hero. Since old Mr. Che's virtue matched that sword, Baiwu, as a junior, wished to present it to him as a gift to express his admiration. Yang Kang asked the protagonist not to flatter him too much, explaining that if he succeeded in selling the sword to certain international buyers, it would likely fetch an extremely high price. Baiwu emphasized that, in the world of antiques, finding the right owner is what truly matters. This treasure should belong to Yang Kang, so the protagonist would refuse to sell it to anyone else, regardless of the offer. Yang Kong looked at him and paused, carefully contemplating his next words. He placed the sword on the table, suggesting they should drink tea. Baiwu sensed that something was amiss and wondered if Yang Kong might be dissatisfied with the sword, or perhaps even with the protagonist himself. The system indicated that Yang Kang's satisfaction with the sword was at 100%, while his satisfaction with the protagonist was only at 10%. Yang Kang explained that the gift was too precious for him to accept. In addition, when forming friendships, he valued character and ability more than the worth of a gift. As a result, he preferred to uphold those friendships in a gentlemanly manner. The protagonist was taken aback, believing this to be a direct rejection of him. From his perspective, it seemed he was not qualified to be Yang Kang's friend. The system indicated that he was truly not qualified for that. Yang Kong emphasized that the sword was a valuable item, with a market price of $5 million, and he was willing to pay that amount. He handed the check to the protagonist, stating that if he found any valuable items in the future, he could bring them there, as he would not treat him unfairly. Bai Wu realized that the old man was a significant figure in the industry and likely viewed Bai Wu as a mere pawn, believing he was attempting to curry favor by passing off a sword as Liu Bai's. This revelation made the old man even more intriguing. If the protagonist didn't demonstrate genuine ability, he wouldn't be able to win him over. He glanced toward the window and suddenly had an idea. He stated that business was strictly business. If Mr. Qi truly wanted to buy that sword, then the price was not appropriate. Yang Kang questioned the protagonist's meaning behind that statement. Bai Wu emphasized that the old man had just stated that if the sword truly belonged to Liu Bei, its value would be 50 million. Yang Kang asked Bai Wu if he was truly certain that the sword had been used by the Duke. Bai Wu began sipping his tea and asked Yang Kang if he had ever been curious about how, at the protagonist's age, he could instantly recognize genuine items. Old Qi remarked that the protagonist truly had penetrating eyes and wondered if it was possible he came from a family with a tradition of study. The protagonist explained that, to be completely honest, he had some family experience, but it was not in antique appraisal. Rather, it was in divination. Yang Kang questioned his true skill in the I Ching and wondered if all the antiques had been uncovered through divination. The protagonist affirmed that was exactly right, explaining that it wasn't just antiques but also other items. To illustrate his point, he mentioned that Zhao Xiao was hiding outside the window. Yang Kang was taken aback by this. The protagonist realized that it was now up to Zhao Xiao to bring down her own grandfather. Zhao Xiao was indeed hanging outside the window, claiming that the protagonist, that scoundrel, would likely attempt to deceive her grandfather once more. As a result, she needed to listen to what they were saying inside. As soon as she stuck her head through the window, her grandfather was already staring at her. Bai Wu felt relieved that he had used the system to check her location earlier. Zhao Xiao was taken aback when she saw her grandfather. The protagonist mocked the situation, claiming he had no idea she possessed Spider-Woman's abilities. This only heightened Zhao Xiao's irritation as she confronted him, questioning how he could dare to mock her in such a moment. She warned him that if he continued, she would demonstrate how a young woman could teach a valuable lesson. Her grandfather became angry, and she admitted that she already knew she was in the wrong. She jumped down from the window, stating that she would go home and reflect right away. Bai Wu asked Yang Kang if he now believed he had the ability to divine things. The old man suggested that the protagonist might have simply heard something outside the window and assumed it was her. This alone was not sufficient to convince him that Bai Wu possessed omniscience. The protagonist found the old man to be quite difficult to deal with. He decided to ask what would be necessary to make Yang Kang believe that story. Yang Kang replied that if the protagonist were truly omniscient and capable of divining and predicting events, then he wouldn't need to ask that question at all. Bai Wu sensed that he was being outmaneuvered by the old man. If he didn't quickly find a way to persuade him, he risked losing the opportunity for cooperation. He inquired about the probability of convincing the old man. The system indicated that the probability of success was 87.25%. Bai Wu was taken aback by such a high success rate, yet he remained uncertain about what actions to take next. After some contemplation, he finally determined the path he should take. He asked the system whether revealing the true origins of all the antiques in that room would be enough to persuade the old man. The system confirmed that he was correct, indicating a probability of 100%. Bai Wu emphasized that he had been observing closely and noted a total of 26 ancient items in the room. However, the old man argued that identifying 26 antiques merely demonstrated the protagonist's counting skills and did not prove his ability to truly divine anything. Bai Wu interrupted the old man and urged him to listen carefully. Yang Kang expressed his willingness to listen. The protagonist smiled, noticing that the old man remained very calm, but he would soon be shocked. He instructed the system to initiate the operation. They quickly identified all the items present. Bai Wu stated that the rosewood furniture set dates back to the Qianlong era of the Qing dynasty. Yang Kang stated that he had performed quite well. Bai Wu emphasized that it should be imperial furniture valued at around 20 million and asked if he was correct about that. The old man claimed he was completely correct, but that alone was not enough to convince him. Bai Wu picked up a stone and held it in his hand. He stated that it was a superior black jade inkstone, an item from the Wanli period of the Ming dynasty, valued at approximately 5 million. The old man remained calm and insisted that he was right. The protagonist emphasized that this black jade inkstone was previously used by Zhang Zhuxiang, the Grand Secretary during the Wanli reign of the Ming dynasty. This surprised the old man. He stood up quickly and asked the protagonist how he knew that, explaining that they, the older experts, had spent 2 entire years consulting countless historical records before confirming the origin of that inkstone. Baiwu laughed and confidently stated that he had, of course, divined it. Yang Kong was left astonished, wondering how this could be possible. The protagonist simply smiled and remarked that, by the looks of it, he needed to keep watching patiently. Yang Kong apologized, admitting that he had lost his composure, and asked the protagonist to carry on. Baiwu stated that the brush holder was an item from the imperial study of Emperor Jia Qing of the Qing dynasty, while the brushes themselves were from the Republic of China era. The bronze wine pot originated from the state of Song during the spring and autumn period. The blue and white porcelain originated from the Hudian kiln in Jingdezhen during the Yuan dynasty. Yang Kong was genuinely taken aback by everything happening around him. The protagonist emphasized that he had explained the origins of all 26 antiques, questioning whether there were still any doubts about his abilities. The old man said nothing more, for if he had not witnessed it with his own eyes, he would not have believed it at all. Baiwu asks if he now believes him when he claims that the sword was used by Liu Bei. The old man stated that the protagonist was truly a divine calculator and, for that reason, deserved admiration. He emphasized that he had already verified the lineage and origin of the items in the room. However, he could not confirm whether the sword had actually been used by the Duke. Asserting that the Duke had wielded it based solely on the protagonist's deductions felt a bit too mystical. Baiwu was taken aback by this response. It seemed that, from the old man's expression, he still did not believe him. However, the system stated that this was not true, emphasizing that the old man believed in the protagonist completely. Baiwu felt confused. If the old man truly believed him, then why was he still arguing? Perhaps this was merely a form of provocation, or maybe the old man needed something that the protagonist could help him resolve. The system displayed a perfect score of 100% for that question. Baiwu regarded the old man as formidable, having just been won over by him. With a frown, the old man was already employing the 36 stratagems against him once more. However, this was to be expected from a major figure in the industry, a true master of human nature. He asked the system if the old man had something specific in mind, and wondered if it could be that item. The system confirmed that was correct. The protagonist then inquired again whether the issue the old man was concerned about was related to antiques, and the system affirmed that it was. Baiwu wondered if there was an item that the old man couldn't appraise, which led him to request the protagonist's assistance in evaluating it. The system confirmed that this was absolutely correct. The protagonist let out a laugh. He asked Mr. Che if there were any items he wanted him to appraise. Yang Kong was once again surprised, asking how he had found that out. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on new content. Thank you.